Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How is everybody this fine Thursday morning in the best place in Nevada? Okay. All right, we're going to call a meeting of the Board of Supervisors to order. Today is Thursday, July 6, 2017. It is 8:30 a.m. We're at the Community Center at the Sierra Room. We're also streaming. Could we have a roll call, official roll call, just get us started off? Sue.
Good morning. Supervisor Bowd. Here. Supervisor Bonkowski. Here. Supervisor Bagwell. Here. Supervisor Barrett. Here. Mayor Kroll. Here. Have a quorum.
Thank you, Sue. Can we call on our friend Chad Adamick for the St. Paul's Lutheran Family Church to get us started on the right foot? Chad, thank you for helping us out this morning.
Let us pray. We come before you today to give you honor and praise, O God of all creation. You are worthy of praise. You are the source of all that is good. You are the source of all of our blessings. Thank you for every gift that we have been given. We thank you for the opportunity to come and gather together this day. We ask for your hand of blessing on today's meeting. We ask that you would guide and direct the board and all of our community leaders so that they are full of wisdom, productivity, and respect for one another. Thank you for helping us accomplish our work and our goals this day. Amen.
Well said. Thanks, Chad.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we're now going to move on to item number 5, public comment. This is the time for comment on any topic as relevant to or within the authority of this public body. Mr. Kittis, good morning to you. How are you doing this morning? Good.
Mayor, Supervisors, for the record, please. Bruce Kittis, Carson City resident. I'm here this morning asking you to reconsider your vote on July 7th, 2016, approving the Fourth Amendment to the South Carson takeover from the state, specifically item 29B, paragraphs 12 and 13. In my opinion, the city should not indemnify the state. It should be the reverse. The city should be indemnifying the city. The state turnover in good condition should not include a hazardous waste site. No Carson City taxpayer dollars should be spent on the subject site. Those dollars should be spent on maintaining residential streets. The board approved a complete street project with incomplete and erroneous information. The June 19th Ethics Commission hearing has memorialized facts not in evidence at that July 7th hearing last year. Supervisor Bonkowski did not disclose his substantial interest in the partnership's ownership of the commercial property at the time of the hearing. Ownership spanned 11 years. The state has charged the partnership owns the gas tanks on the subject contiguous NDOT parcel. Bonkowski did not disclose the partnership continues to lease a second contiguous NDOT parcel used for ingress, egress, and parking for the now sold commercial building. The city will be negotiating the sale or lease of the two contiguous parcels. Mr. Pittenger's report had serious omissions. He reported one tank was stable. There are 3 tanks, not one. The tanks are single wall, not the safer double wall. The tanks were installed in 1967, 50 years ago. Mr. Pittenger did not tell the board a diesel tank leak was reported in 1994. Resource Concepts did the investigation. In 1996, the tanks were relined. They were not replaced. Mr. Pittenger did not report that a December 1st, 2010 NDOT letter to the Bonkowski Partnership said the tanks were not in compliance and demanded that the 3 tanks be removed by June 1st, 2011. It's 6 years later and the tanks are still on site. Why should Carson City take over the Nevada Environmental Protection and NDOT's responsibility? Bonkowski, a licensed commercial real estate broker, and his able attorney have been unable to resolve the issues. It appears the city is bailing out the Bonkowski Partnership. The partnership did pay the Nevada Petroleum Fund insurance fee for at least 12 years. Why hasn't the insurance fund been utilized? Our DA said nothing precludes him from seeking third-party reimbursement. The cost should preclude him, and Carson City should not be exposed to the liability. In 2009, I'm almost done. In 2009, the Board of Supervisors settled a lawsuit with Mr. Serpa. In 1980, Serpa had purchased the old city dump on Draco Way. 29 years later, the city settled. We were told federal law had changed and the city was potentially liable. The party that places hazardous waste is responsible for hazardous waste. There had been neither indemnification by SERPA nor cost adjustment for remediation by the city. You were the mayor at that time and you're familiar with that. The board ignored, in this case, the city is indemnifying the state, but no cost adjustment for remediation has been revealed. Is the state exempt from the federal law cited in the SERPA case? The board ignored Maurice White's warning at the hearing last year when he told you there is no way of knowing the cost of the cleanup. Only when the 3 tanks and the piping are removed and the surrounding soil tested will you know the full scope of work and the total cost, and of course all under the direction of the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection. Do nothing and we will see how many tens of thousands of city taxpayer dollars this board has incurred on behalf of Supervisor Bonkowski's partnership. The city should not be indemnifying the state. In my opinion, based on what we know today, Supervisor Bonkowski should resign now. Thank you. Not a pleasant report, but there's, I probably won't leave to see it, but you're going to spend $250,000 or more taking care of that site, and the taxpayers shouldn't pay for it. Thank you.
Other public comment? Mr. Vaccaro.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Jerry Vaccaro, businessman, Carson City. I'm here today. I have to echo some of this previous speaker's facts, so I won't recap those, but they are facts. Mr. Bonkowski, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. You can resign for your bad deeds. And if you don't think you had bad deeds, then I think everybody on the board should do what you do, because you got away with it. Now, I've requisitioned the court reporter's stuff from the commission hearing. And there's a very, very good probability, once I receive those, that you perjured yourself at that commission hearing to cover your behind, okay? Number one, you've known, I introduced you to Mr. Snyder. I got you the listing on that property. That's how far I have the history on that property. You were with McCall Realty at the time. You couldn't sell the property. You wound up buying the front end because Mr. Snyder knew there was liability with those gas tanks. I'd like to see a copy of that escrow when you purchased that property, knowing that you knew that the gas tanks were leaking. All during the time of the planning with this deal with NDOT, you never divulged your ownership of that to Mr. Penninger. Mr. Penninger has now left the city, okay? This doesn't pass the smell test. Do you understand that? You're a public official. People have put your trust in you, and you made no attempt to divulge any sort of interest or ownership in that property. Knowing that those tanks were leaking, you had an attorney represent you, Mr. Scott Heaton, and you got nowhere with NDOT. They wouldn't sell it. You're also the chairman of the RTC. So how could you all during this planning thing hide the fact that you had ownership of that property adjacent to the right-of-way that the NDOT was going to deed back to the city? 8 months, the investigation. I filed a complaint on November 7th, 2016. Your hearing was last month with the commission. All during that 8 months, you never stepped up to the plate and admitted guilt. You made a deal by using the district attorney's office to take care of your legal fees. You had no legal fees. And the district attorney got you a sweetheart of a deal, stipulated settlement agreement. And you still made no real full disclosure of your involvement. So I am asking you to resign, because I think the public trust in you as a public official is zero. And I think that your real estate license may be in jeopardy. And Mr. Mayor, you're an officer of the court. You're a lawyer. If you accept and condone this behavior of your fellow board members, we've got zero representation for this city. My second issue is with Title 19. Mr. Barrett, is it? Barrett. You're fully aware of my allegations against the airport. For 20 years, they have not enforced Title 19. 20 years, they've been accepting money from the FAA, over $30 million for Carson City Airport, even though they knew they were in violation of Title 19. Title 19 stipulates one airplane for each hangar on city property. To this day, that's still not enforced. Now you have your law partner, Mr. Steve Takis, who has represented the Airport Authority for the past 10 years. He hasn't enforced it. Now he's in here today, and he's going to ask that Title 19 be modified. So I'm asking you to deny that and continue that so we can get full disclosure on more details of why the city has not enforced Title 19. There has never been a building inspection in 20 years. There hasn't been a fire inspection in 20 years. They just conducted one inspection, Mr. Appel's hangar, and found violations. It's been a year now. I think I contacted the city manager on this. We had a meeting with Jason Woodbury, I believe, and nothing has been accomplished. Now, I know you can't comment on this, and you can't take action on this. I'll come back if I have to. Believe me, I have Mr. Bonkowski's files here. I can make full disclosure for him if that's what it's going to come to be. But I think the right thing for him to do today is to resign. Thank you.
Okay. Other public comment? Anybody? All right, we're going to have public comment as we go through the day and also at the end of the hearing. So we'll now move on to item number 6, possible approval of the minutes of June 1st, 2017. Everybody had a chance to look at the minutes? Motion's in order.
Mayor, I move to approve the minutes of the Carson City Board of Supervisors for June 1st, 2017 as presented.
Motion second on the motion, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye, aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. When we go live on this, we'll figure all that out. Okay, on item number 7, the adoption of the agenda, any changes?
No change.
Board members, any changes?
Yeah, I'd like
On the consent?
item 10A, move from consent agenda.
Okay, we'll do that when we get,
I believe it's 10A, I've checked.
Tax rates?
Yeah.
10A. All right, we'll pull that when we get to the consent agenda. All right, anything else? All right. Unless there's an objection, then we will take the agenda as published. Let's now move to special presentations. I'd ask the board to join me down on the floor, and we'll take up item 8A, the presentation of the Parks and Recreation Month. Jennifer, come on up with me, and we'll go down it.
Woo-hoo, what a team. Wow, we're in good company today. We're the next one. This is the staff one. Thanks.
All right, ready? I'll get it. Are we ready? This is a proclamation for Parks and Recreation Month, July 2017. Reads as follows. Whereas parks and recreation are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including Carson City. And whereas Carson City's Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Department strives to provide residents and visitors with exceptional parks, open space, and recreational opportunities while preserving excuse me, our region's valuable natural, historical, and cultural resources. And whereas Carson City's parks, trails, and open spaces are vitally important to the quality of life in our community, ensuring the health of all community citizens, of all Carson City citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of our region. And whereas Carson City's vast park system of more than 30 parks, that's a lot, and 6,900 acres of open space, I think that's 11.5 square miles, something close to that, allows for recreation opportunities that help build a healthy, active community which aids in the prevention of chronic disease, provides therapeutic recreation services for individuals of all abilities, and also improves the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And whereas Carson City's premier park facilities enhance our community's economic vitality by increasing property values while promoting tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas Carson City's parks and natural areas are fundamental to environmental stewardship, by improving water quality, protecting groundwater, preventing flooding, improving the quality of air that we breathe, providing natural buffers to development, and preserving the habitat for wildlife. And whereas our parks and natural areas ensure the ecological beauty of Carson City and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives and the National Recreation and Parks Association have designated July as Parks and Recreation Month and calls upon communities throughout our nation in recognizing the importance of our nation's parks and recreation facilities. Now, therefore, I, Robert Kroll, Mayor of Carson City, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors and our community, do hereby proclaim July 2017 as July 2017 as Parks and Recreation Month in Carson City, and urge all residents to spend time with family and friends, enjoying their favorite parks and trails, participating in their favorite sports, or just relaxing outdoors like some of us older folks do, and enjoying the beautiful region we call home. Dated this 6th day of July, 2017. Good job, you guys. Good job, Carson City community. All right. I know we got hit a little bit with a flood, but we're coming back from it here. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the staff, the ones that are here, but we have hundreds of staff that are out in the parks every day, and I just wanted to thank them for all that they do. So thank you so much.
Thank you. 30 parks. 30 parks and 6,900 acres of open space, a lot to take care of. But it makes what makes Carson City a great place to live. Thanks to all of you for doing what you do. And I know, I just mentioned to Jennifer that, we got hit pretty hard on our parks with the flood. And we've got a lot of volunteers, plus you folks here did help bring that back, and we still got more work to do on those things. But when the floods were hitting, I know that the Parks and Recreation folks are out there on the front line doing what they could to protect our parks. So thank you very much. All right, Jennifer. Now we're going to do one more, right? Should we get a picture here? Yeah. All right, let's get a picture. Come on up here.
I think we have some park commissioners and open space board members too. Donna, you want to come up? As long as we look good. Oh, okay. All right. Before we move on to the next item, we're going to acknowledge a few of the donors that we've had over the past fiscal year. But before we do that, I just wanted to make an announcement on behalf of the Carson City Parks Foundation. They're a wonderful organization that supports all that we do. And they also like to acknowledge all of the volunteers and people that, not only give back with their time, sometimes their money, but really they just really care about this community that we call home. So I just wanted to acknowledge the volunteers of the year and let you know that they'll be presented awards at Mills Park Wednesday, July 12th at 5:30 p.m. So I encourage everybody to come attend and thank those volunteers for that. But if you're not able to attend, I wanted to let you know that our Volunteer of the Years is Chris McKenzie, Volunteer of the Year is Robin Orloff, Organization of the Year is Muscle Powered, and Business of the Year is CarsonNow.org. So we really appreciate all that they've done to support the park system. And let me go. Sure. Yeah, so if the donors that are here, if they could come up as I call your name, and then we'll take a picture at the end. And just wanted to thank all of these donors. These are our major donors, not all of our donors for the last fiscal year, but I wanted to just acknowledge all that they've done to contribute to our department and the quality of life in this community. Our first donor is Kiwanis Club of Sierra Nevada.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Here, come up here. We'll take a picture. We'll get everybody out there. Okay, thanks. Then Carson City Kiwanis Club.
Got two of them.
Okay, thank you. The Kiwanis Club is great. They really provide a lot of labor and support, especially for the Carson River cleanup every year. The Carson City Chamber of Commerce. I think Ronnie's here.
Congratulations, Ronnie. You guys are ubiquitous, man.
The Clear Creek Bowman.
Clear Creek?
That's all right. Clear Creek Bowmen are great. They support our archery range up at Centennial Park.
They're here.
Oh.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for everything you do. See's even wearing a T-shirt today. That's good.
Thank you, guys.
There we go.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Come on up here. Come on.
And the Downtown Business Association.
You guys are ubiquitous too. Ubiquitous, man. Okay.
I like that word.
Oh, yeah. Good job. Good job. All right.
Then Genoa Trees and Landscape Materials. Keystone Masonry. For those of you that don't know, the Keystone Masonry has members of the Wanganima family are part of that, and they recently did that beautiful masonry work to repair some vandalism we had at the Wanganima house at Mills Park, and they did a great job. Nevada Division of Forestry.
They're not here?
The Nevada State Motor Pool.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. The Northern Sierra Ladies Gun Club.
Hi, Carol. How you doing?
Thank you, Carol.
You've done a lot for that club.
Tahoe Fence.
Tahoe Fence? Anybody?
And Waste Management.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks much.
And then I saved our two larger donors for last. We've got the Carson City Nugget has been a tremendous partner with the ice rink over the years, and they provided the property free of charge every year for us to host the Arlington Square ice rink. So we just wanted to thank them for that.
Oh, how's your dad doing? Okay.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks to the Nugget. Say hello to everybody. Thanks for everything they do.
And then last but not least is the Carson Tiger Sharks. If you haven't been to our aquatic facility, we have a beautiful new scoreboard, a $65,000 scoreboard, thanks to the Carson Tiger Sharks.
Can you believe that? $65,000? Pretty darn good, man. Okay. All right. Here, take that. I'd like it. There you go. All right. All right. Let's get a picture. You want to give that Nevada Division of Forestry one back? Okay, we're now going to move on to Universal Public Procurement Certification. Who's going to do that? Do we have that this morning? Laura?
We're just going to congratulate her, right?
Okay.
There I go.
Why don't you tell us what's going on here, Laura?
How about we just congratulate her for the award?
Because you're going to talk about the award that you got, right? It's a good award.
Yeah.
So tell us what it's all about.
So the council, the UPPC Council, is sort of the education and professional development arm of the National Institute of Government Procurement. They sort of set the standards or lead the way in the standards of procurement policy and procedure. So you apply, and Carson City was awarded because we follow the standard guidelines that they set forth.
Very good. Well, you're to be congratulated, and all those who work with you are to be congratulated as well.
Thank you.
It's always good to get recognition from your peers and those who, who understand more closely what's going on in that area. So well done, Laura, and well done on a lot of fronts.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. right, we'll take up the consent agenda. I know that there's a potential, well, we'll do it when we get to the consent agenda, but get to the motions on it. We want to pull 10A. Any board members want to pull anything else? We have, any members of the public want to pull anything else from the consent agenda? I don't see the city manager. Anything? We okay? Okay, all right. Then we'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of 10A.
Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of items 9A, 10B, 11A with a correction to the expiration date of the contract from June 20th to June 30th, 11B, and 12A.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Thank you. All right, now let's take up the items that are pulled from the consent agenda. Let's take up 10A. I think, no, we got to do, yeah, right, 10A. Okay. This one is, you want to tell us what we're doing on this one, just to set the record straight? I mean, we've already approved it with the budget and all that stuff, but bring us up to date on where we are.
Good morning, Nancy Paulson, Chief Financial Officer. So this is to adopt a resolution to levy the Carson City fiscal 18 ad valorem tax rates that were approved by the board and the redevelopment authority during the budget hearings. And now they've been certified by the Nevada Tax Commission. This rate also includes the rate of other governing bodies for a total combined rate of $3.57.
Okay. There's no change in what we have in the budget. All right. All right. Questions of the board? Supervisor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm fully aware that we already signaled we're doing this and that this is just one more step in the process, but I feel from years of watching government that it's a good idea not to put something that raises taxes on a consent agenda just for purposes of making the record clear. I also wanted to ask either Nancy or the city manager, as I understand this, the nickel for the deferred maintenance matters is in here. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. City manager, is there any reason we can't do the same kind of nickel next year for the deferred maintenance on roads?
There would be
if we as a majority wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, there would be none. You have the authority within the total ad valorem property, the cap on it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make those points, given especially the fact that in the other main sales tax, the main tax source for the city, sales taxes have been coming in above expectations, so I think we should look clearly towards that. Otherwise, I just wanted to get this on the record. Thank you.
Public comment on this issue? Board? Motions in order.
Resolution number? 2017 R28.
I move to adopt resolution number 2017 R28, a resolution to levy Carson City fiscal year 2017-18 tax rates as certified by the Nevada Tax Commission.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Thank you. All right, that concludes the consent agenda. Now let's pick up item number 14. This is city manager. You want to take it from here? You want Mary Walker to come up and help you out there? Yeah, Mary. Mary. Steve Walker, you want to come up too? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Board of Supervisors. For the record, Mary Walker, Walker and Associates. This is our 19th year of having our four-county legislative coalition called the Western Nevada Legislative Coalition, Carson City, Douglas County, Lyon County, and Story County. So it's really been an honor to have worked for you and the other counties for that long. In particular, before we start, I do want to say thank you very much to Mayor Kroll, Supervisor Bonkowski, Nick Morano, and Nancy Paulson, who are on our legislative coalition, and all the work and help and direction they have given us during the session. In total, we had 515 bills, which we monitored. A lot of it had to do with the elected officials, which they handled unless it had a fiscal impact to the city. But we did have a lot of work to do. I want to thank particularly City Manager Moreno, and also the staff did a great job. The city manager got all 515 of those bills, plus responses from the departments. For the most part, the bills have to do with operations, daily, how we handle our business. There are policy issues that come before you. But for the most part, we really rely on the city staff to help us ferret out how these bills affect us. And they did a wonderful job, and just want to say thank you for all their work. If I was going to recap the session, I guess I would say that we ended up a little bit better off than when we started. And that's pretty good, because some sessions, it wasn't that way. So it was a challenge. We had a lot of challenges. We had a lot of collective bargaining bills and problematic public works bills, prevailing wage bills. Every single one of them were either amended to alleviate concerns, killed in committee, or vetoed by the governor. And such as, for example, AB 271, general employees receiving binding fact-finding that would materially affect the way that we handle our negotiations. That bill was killed. SB 469, 25% fund balance. The unions wanted to take that down to 16.6%. That was killed, so that basically is left whole. The SB 356 regarding allowing collective bargaining agreements to continue past their expiration, that was killed. And a lot of the prevailing wage bills were. So basically, we find at the end of the session, NRS 288, collective bargaining, and any prevailing wage and public works types bills were pretty much left the same. I do want to thank, in particular, Darren Schultz and Steve Walker, my husband. The two of them really, as far as local government goes, they were the ones up front arguing against some of the more onerous provisions of those public works bills, and they made a lot of progress this time. I want to thank the work that they did. Some of the other challenges we had, AB 153, Assemblyman Daley's economic development bill, that literally would have stopped economic development in northern Nevada because of the chilling effect to the businesses. And I in particular want to thank Supervisor Bonkowski for helping me with that. It's a big difference of myself as a lobbyist getting up and talking about the effect to the private sector, but to have somebody with his knowledge and expertise get up there, sit with legislators with me to explain all the ins and outs and how it affects. That makes a big difference. I want to say thank you very much for not only stepping forward and helping with that, but knowing the people other people who could also step forward and help. So that one was scary. There were several others. AB 311, this consolidated tax, which would have taken $4 million from Lyon County's local governments and given it to Fernley, even though in particular that wouldn't affect Carson. One of the iterations it would have taken $4 million statewide. It would have affected Carson City, but the precedent setting of that was really chilling. SB 179, airplane tax abatement, that alone would have cost Carson City a couple $100,000 a year, so that was killed. That was one of those that Steve felt like he was Don Quixote by himself arguing against this bill. SB 236, marijuana at events, that was killed. AB 407 regarding cooperative extension, that would have shifted a lot of the money that UNR has for cooperative extension down to southern Nevada. So ultimately, that was vetoed by the governor. AB 310 on public administrators, that was amended, and the treasurer's bill, SB 245, was amended to eliminate the negative fiscal impacts to us. So the ones that really would have had a lot of negative impacts were either killed, or amended. So we left the session pretty well. Some of the positive bills we were able to pass, SB 54, Lyon County's infrastructure tax expansion of use bill, which also now includes operation and maintenance of some such things such as public safety and those types of things. SB 57, Story County's V&T bill, that passed, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for all your help on that. AB 519, that provided 50% grants to replace the voting machines. SB 503 provided $250,000 for river clearing, which is very important, but it also provides federal match. AB 417, finally, for the first time, establishing a statewide Main Street was passed. SB 199 on distilleries, and bills regarding purchase and leasing voting machines, various sound water bills. SB 486 provided $5 million each year to local governments, plus 3% gross revenue on marijuana establishments. SB 176 on body cameras. It did mandate body cameras, but it did provide the funding for it. And then in regards to...
Sort of.
Sort of. Sort of.
Yeah, it put the funding onus on us, gave us a way to, but it told us, we'll tell you to do it, now you guys go bite the bullet.
Yeah, yeah,
All
no,
right.
yes, that's exactly correct. On the state budget, we had worked, or I had worked over the interim. If you recall, we had an error in the Child Protective Services budget, which increased our cost by 50%. We were able to work with the state up front. Mike Wilden asked me, and Richard Whitley, Director of Department of Health and Human Services, asked me to work with the state on building the CPS budget so that we made sure that there were no further errors, so that this time around we could go in and everybody could be in agreement. So I'm very happy we were able to eliminate that error. If we hadn't have done that, there would have been another 50% increase this year, these next 2 years coming up in regards to Child Protective Services. And China Springs, for the first time, we worked with the state up front as a department. And we were treated like a department rather than being a, somebody's stepchild, some fourth, generation down the line. And it worked out really, really well. So we were pleased with how that worked. Before Steve talks about the water issues and natural resource issues, I do want to go through with you this interim, what happens after the legislative session, because it's only 4 months, that a lot of the key issues that cannot be dealt with in a 4-month period are basically handled in the 18-month period in between legislative sessions. So there's various studies, there's various committees that will work and meet over that 18-month period to look at the more complicated type of issues, such as water, such as public lands. So some of the, what's really important about the interim is that if you're not there participating in those interim studies, and they all come in and they have their final bill decisions about what bills those committees are going to move forward to in the next legislative session. If you're not part of that process and you just come in during the full legislative session to give input, the first thing they're going to ask you is, where were you in the last 18 months? So it's important to be a part of the entire legislative process, which also includes the interim committees. The interim committees, they include Legislative Committee on Health Care. They're going to be looking at a lot of different things, from Medicaid to hospital type of issues that could really affect hospitals and ERs in the state of Nevada. Very important issues. Legislative Committee on Public Lands also looks into water issues. Legislative Committee on the Review and Oversight of TRPA and the Marlette Water System, of course, which is very important to us. Legislative Committee on Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice. Legislative Interim Study on Housing Affordability. And the Committee on Local Government Finance, of which I am a member. So those are some of the issues that we would be working on during the interim. That, Mr. Mayor, I can, unless there's
Questions of Mary? Go.
So I'm interested on Assembly Bill 169, which changed the recorder fees. Was that a positive impact, negative impact, or neutral to Carson City? Because it changed the recording fee from $10 first page to $25 for the whole document, eliminated non-conforming pages, and then also increased the fee that we keep for technology from $3 to $5. But do you know, did the overall change from $10 to $25, was it positive, negative, or neutral to Carson City? Or you really don't know yet?
Sue Merriweather, we have not had any input from any of the title companies or anyone yet regarding those fees, but it will definitely cost. Now, I believe the total cost for recording a document is $36.
By the time you put all the additional fees on?
And then, then we will be, I know Max is talking about coming to the board or talking to the board or about there's an extra fee to help pay for, I'm sorry, I don't know the terminology of it, but to help pay for attorney fees that would be coming out of the city's money, which will, I don't know if you want to weigh in on it, but we will be looking into that. So the fee may even go up even higher than $36 for Carson City.
So again, I just wanted to put it on the record, though, it wasn't this board raising that fee. Someone else helped us accomplish that activity, but, okay, so we don't know the impact yet. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, maybe I missed it, and if I did, I apologize, but I'm not sure I heard anything about, I believe it was Senator Kekeffer's bill, which would have put the point of sales tax on vehicles to be in the county in which it is registered. And I think I know what happened, but what happened to that bill? And more importantly, why did it happen? And how was it that he represents both Carson City and Reno that he would introduce such a bill, if you know?
For the record, Mary Walker, actually, that bill didn't get any legs, so it didn't go anywhere. I did some general analysis on it. I actually think it would have cost the Washoe County School District money, because Washoe County School District just increased their sales tax, and now if Carson City citizens went up and bought vehicles in Reno, they would be paying the Carson City sales tax, which is about 0.9% less than Reno. It would actually have cost Washoe County School District money.
But why did it have no legs? It just...
I think once they probably took a look at it.
Infinite wisdom prevailed.
That's right. That's right. Once they took a look at it and the harm that it would cause, it basically would have wiped out the school district's voter-approved increase in sales tax on vehicles purchased out of Washoe County citizens. So I think they just saw that as problematic.
I think also, to be fair to Senator Kekeffer, he had originally brought that bill draft forward based on, I think, the Chamber of Commerce. He was never enthused about it to begin with. So I think, to be fair to him as well, I don't know how much he actually was trying to push that bill to get it going. So I don't think it actually made it out of bill draft form.
No, it didn't.
Into an actual bill.
It didn't.
So.
Any other questions of Mary? Steve, Mr. Walker.
Good morning, Mayor and Board of Supervisors. For the record, my name is Steve Walker. I'll be brief. I focus on water bills. I also public works bills, and I got a new assignment this session: marijuana bills. And interesting. On the water bills, first of all, because of Carson City's water situation, which basically can be described as a reliance on decreed water rights, waters that are decreed by the creek rights you own and by the river, and the fact that you have a very well-managed system. From a water planning standpoint, you have that balance of water resource and land. And so a lot of the water issues that go through the legislature, for particularly the valleys that are adjacent to the east slope of the Sierras that we represent, Douglas County and Carson City, the water bills typically aren't germane to your operations. But I will say during this session, and I've done this for about 20 years, water bills, we did more in water this session than we have in the last 15 years. And we did some important things from a statewide standpoint. And one of those is that the vested water rights are water rights that are claimed prior to the development of water law. And in rural Nevada, people that live on creeks and streams or springs have vested water rights that have never gone through what they call an adjudication. They think that they're the most valuable water rights around because they do meet the first in time, first in place criteria. But in fact, until they are gone through an adjudication and the proofs are made, they aren't worth much. A municipality will never buy a vested water right to serve houses because it hasn't been adjudicated. We finally started with a bill, mostly SB 74, to require that the people with, vested water rights submit the proofs for the vested water rights, and by 2028 start the total adjudication process. Why this is important is because the state really doesn't know how much water it has or water resources it has until it goes through this process. And we've been stalling on it for 50 years. And so I think that was very important. From Carson City's standpoint, one of the water bills also, SB 74, will facilitate water conservation reporting to the state engineer by putting water conservation elements not in gallons per capita per day, but in actual acre feet saved. And it's a small movement, but it helps from an administrative standpoint. I would say that maybe the reason water bills move forward this session, and unlike last session when we had the Republican majority, is there seemed to be nonpartisan discussion. And I have to say that the Senator Kinsella from the Natural Resources Committee, a young woman from Las Vegas with no water background, actually helped. It was one individual that really contributed by I guess, trusting people and not making it a partisan issue. I will, when I think of the legislative session, I've never been in a legislative session where I opposed more bills. But who was with me? The names stand up. Jennifer, Darren, Nancy, Sue, Nick, the whole staff was always there with me, and I really, really appreciate that. There was another name, too, a former colleague, Al Kramer. Al did a great job, and he was very accessible, and he provided input to the legislators, particularly on government affairs, from his experience in Carson City. And he was very effective, but he was also very accessible to Mary and I, and we do appreciate that. Mary did discuss the Public Works bill. Basically, we oppose most of them, and the governor vetoed them. Our procedure was if we don't go and oppose them, then we don't give him the background and the record to justify vetoes. And so that's why we were there. And in most cases, we were, there wasn't very many counties with us. And again, I thank Carson City for doing that. On the marijuana bills, you as the board have dealt with marijuana issues much more than I have, and because because that's who you're approving those retail sales. The only one that I see that I think could be an issue with Carson is the SB 375, and authorizes the government to develop agreements with tribe on recreational sales. Because basically tribal lands now can, and as long as you follow state law, then you can set up your marijuana business, your recreational sales. I know that in Douglas County, where they have denied recreational sales, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you now set them up on tribes, and that could affect you. for the most part, by going through the bills, I thought they were handled well, and that the number of marijuana bills, something between 15 and 20, actually 3 or 4 of them passed. And so I think that showed reasonableness. And so again, it was a good session, and I really thank Carson City staff for their support and enjoy representing Carson City.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions of Steve? John, Supervisor Barrett.
Yeah, Steve, thanks. Just wanted to mention that I ran into Al Kramer yesterday at Rayleigh's, and I asked him how he enjoyed the session. And he said, well, it's no fun being in the minority, but he had a smile on his face, and I think he agreed with you that it was a good session. And I want to thank you both and everybody who worked with you, because I covered 4 legislatures in my lifetime when I was a newsman, and playing defense is 80% of the game usually. And it sounds like that's what it was this year. On the marijuana matter, I'm curious about if you can give me any insights into the Sigerbloom's bill to have public events. Why did that die an anonymous death?
No, I might be able to help you.
Thanks, because I'm struggling.
So, to answer your question, Supervisor Barrett, and this has come up in a number of other forms, the federal policy towards states that have decided to regulate and legalize retail marijuana has been really governed since 2013 by a memorandum that was put out by a Deputy Attorney General, a gentleman named James Cole. So the Cole memo is the kind of the federal policy, and they lay out, Cole lays out in his memo to all the U.S. attorneys what the criteria are that the federal government thinks are important that they are going to continue to enforce. Barring any other, if a state crafts its regulation so that those, I think there are 8 federal priorities, so that those 8 federal priorities are protected, the federal government is not going to inject itself into possession and use of small amounts of marijuana, even distribution of marijuana. There was a lot of thought that Senate Bill 236 would have been the event, would have been the law that would have triggered a federal response into a state regulation and legalization of retail marijuana. I think that's why it probably just died. It never made it to the governor's desk for his veto. So, I mean, that's just the conjecture that people were worried that that was going to be what would trigger a federal response.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to also add, because I did go to the hearings on that bill, that there was this general concept of a club with smoke coming out of it, and that being too close to schools, it just being too obvious. The argument was made that if you don't have a place for the tourists to use marijuana because of the private home requirement, that you will hurt revenue. But I think basically there was that just basic issue that it was just too out there. It is too exposed to people that didn't want to be around marijuana. And that discussion occurred at all the hearings of that bill, and it had 3.
Steve, you presented very well at one of the Sierra forums on water. I think you were there with Gogachia and others. And you had an interesting concept about how Carson City's handling of its water may differ from other jurisdictions, particularly like Carson City doesn't issue will serve letters. Do you remember that discussion?
I do. I actually just basically was discussing concepts of water planning.
Yeah, why don't you tell us, reiterate that? I mean, it's an interesting thought that I found you had there.
Well, and I think I somewhat mentioned it, is that I was a water planner for Washoe County for 5 years and developed the first regional water management plan. And and yes, you have to look at all the resources, but the basic concept of water planning is to match your resource with your land, with your vacant land use. And you have to say and make decisions, what's the zoning in this vacant land going to be? And what water resource do I have to provide that for that either change of zoning or existing zoning? And I just basically, in the forum, described the Water Planning 101 and used Carson City as that example. And and also Carson City has, as does Washoe County, the best conjunctive use systems. And conjunctive use is basically the relationship of using surface water and groundwater. So when a surface water is abundant, i.e. this year, you focus on using surface water resting your wells. When you're going to drought, you have to pump your wells more because you don't have the surface water. What that creates then, though, is space in the aquifer, because you've dropped the water table by pumping it, that you can then take advantage of when you have the big surface water years like we did this year, because normally we wouldn't get enough recharge down through the initial soil to get into the aquifer. This year we did, and we had space to store it. Where's the best place to store water? It isn't Lawton Reservoir, and so it is in the ground. And so Carson City has created that conjunctive use, particularly with your surface water treatments at the Quill treatment plant and your Marlette Lake system. So that's why I use Carson City, because you should be proud of the way your water is managed.
Okay. Other questions? Public comment? Anybody want to weigh in on this one? I don't see anybody. Okay. Thanks very much, Steve. Thanks, Mary. Enjoy a little bit of time off till the interim committee start. Okay. We'll now take up item 15. This is Carson City Airport Authority, and as I usually do, I will make a disclosure and abstain. NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from participating when I have a disqualifying conflict. In my private commitment and capacity, I'm a retired partner and of counsel for the law firm of Kempfer Kroll, where Mr. Takis practices law, and I consider him a close personal friend. Therefore, a reasonable person in my position would be affected by this relationship. As such, I will abstain from participating on this matter and turn the gavel over to the Mayor Pro Tem Supervisor Abel. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
So you're going to walk us through this, and just if you could, per the comments that were earlier, the discussion on Title 19 and one airplane per hangar and the issue of the inspections, if you could just discuss that as well.
Will do. Steve Takis, Airport Council, Carson City Airport Authority, and with me is Linda Law, who is the chairman of the Carson City Airport Authority. This item is to adopt an ordinance to implement a hangar use policy. Last year, the FAA adopted a new hangar use policy, and the policy became effective on July 1st of this year. Since January of this year, we began in earnest to study how do we implement this in Carson City. We did a canvassing of other airports to see what they were doing for hangar use policies, see how they plan to implement the FAA's new policy, and that was somewhat difficult. We did collect a lot of information, but I have to say, to summarize it, we didn't see much going on at other airports. When we contacted the FAA on that, they told us that's probably because the policy is relatively new. You guys may be the cutting edge. I don't know if that's true or not, but what we did is then we sat down with the policy itself and we wrote it into this ordinance. Much of this ordinance is copied word from word from the FAA policy. The overall FAA policy says aircraft hangars are for aircraft and aeronautical use, and they define aeronautical use. And aeronautical use, of course, includes storing an aircraft, but it also includes things like building an aircraft, doing repair work, and things like that. They have a list of items that they include, which we've set forth in the ordinance. We have discussed this at the Airport Authority meeting over several months worth of meetings. We've refined it, and of course now we're at the July trigger date, so it's appropriate for us to get ours in place. We could have just said you got to follow the federal laws the federal FAA hangar policy, but that would not have provided very much clarity to the actual users. Instead, we think it's much more helpful to actually have a written policy. In addition, the FAA land use auditor that reviewed our airport and our land use last fall recommended that we adopt something with a little bit more clarity. And so that's what we've done here. We've taken input from all sides of the aviation industry. The FAA even gave us some feedback on concerns that they had. We've incorporated all of those changes into the final policy. And as far as I know, there has been no negative comments received by the Airport Authority as to the policy that we're proposing to you today. Certainly in the process of developing it, there were different views, but I think the final product is a very good product. And what it does is it sets pretty clear statement as what you can use your hangar for and what constitutes aeronautical use. Now, we've gone a step further in the policy that we're proposing here, because the Carson City Airport has a somewhat unique model at the airport. There are many airports out there where the airport owns the hangars. And when you read the FAA's policy looks like it's written for those kinds of airports. It talks about us setting the hangar lease rates and things like that. Our model in Carson City, which was born really out of necessity more than anything else, involved the 1989 timeframe when the Airport Authority was created and the control of the airport was handed over from the city, the management and operation aspects, handed over from the city to the Airport Authority. At that point, we had like $80,000 in the bank, and we thought, oh wow, we've got a lot of money, until we sat down and looked at what our annual expenses would be and realized, oh man, we're going to be broke in less than a year here. It costs more than that to maintain our pavement. So we turned around and found opportunities to lease land for the construction of hangars. And the approach that Carson City and Carson City Airport Authority took back then was to lease fairly large chunks of land, you know, an acre to 2 or 3 acres, and with the requirement that the developer who brings in their private investment funds would construct hangars. The end result is the hangars get built, the city and the airport collect the real property tax on the hangars, we collect the personal property tax on the aircraft located, the personal property located in the hangars, and we also collect a fuel flowage fee based on all the fuel that the aircraft are buying. That has worked out to be an excellent business model. We have been self-sufficient from the very beginning. There's never been a real property tax assessment, which is permitted by law, ad valorem tax for the support of the airport. There's never been financial support given from the city to the airport, other than occasionally we exchange services to help each other out. But we've never come to the city and said, look, we can't make ends meet, we need money from you. So the models work very well. The odd thing is the hangar use policy that was written by the FAA really doesn't fit that model very well. So the challenge for us was, how do we make these fit together? So in our model, when we lease out a chunk of land, we lease it out to a developer who usually sets up a hangar owner association, or hangar condo association, and then sells condo ownership in the hangars to the individual, of the individual hangars to individual owners. Our lease is with the entire project. We collect one check. We don't have the manpower to collect individual checks. We collect one check a month, and we'd require that hangar owner association to police themselves. So the question becomes, well, what do you do if you have one hangar in that association that isn't storing aircraft or isn't otherwise complying with the rules? And certainly we have the legal right to deem the entire lease in default, give them their notice under the lease, which gives them 30 days to cure, and then if they don't cure, we can terminate their entire lease. That didn't sound like a very, I mean, it's definitely a legal avenue that's available to us, but it doesn't sound like a realistic way to address a single hangar problem in a larger hangar group. Thus, we developed a financial disincentive to people who utilize their hangar incorrectly. And so our policy that's adopted here says that if you're not using your hangar for aeronautical use, or you misrepresent those facts to us, because to us that's just as bad, then you get charged a surcharge of $1,000 a month for that hangar. And what that should do is create a financial disincentive for somebody who wants an aircraft hangar to use for something other than aircraft to instead go and rent a mini storage or whatever kind of storage is more suitable for their needs. And that's what we've adopted in here. We ran this past the FAA. They actually like the idea. In fact, the manager of the airport's district office that in Phoenix, who also oversees the Nevada operations, thought it was a creative solution, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's been spreading that around to other airports. But that's what we're doing in here. And so we basically have two remedies if somebody doesn't comply. One is we can terminate their entire lease, which involves taking the steps that are set forth in the lease of giving them 30 days notice, or we assess them this surcharge, which presents to them our message to them that if you're using it for non-aeronautical use, you shouldn't be on the airport. You should be someplace else. Now, some people have complained that this is a solution looking for a problem because we don't have that issue. We have had complaints. I think we heard Mr. Vaccaro complain earlier that he's been complaining for 20 years. He has been complaining for 20 years, but not about this issue. But I've listened to his complaints over many of the years, and I have to say candidly, I appreciate anybody pointing out to us anything we're doing wrong. And we have always taken those complaints seriously and investigated them. In terms of this complaint, each complaint that we've gotten about hangars being used wrongfully, when we've investigated, we have not found facts to substantiate that allegation. So we've actually spent a lot of money chasing ghosts here. But if that use is out there, we believe this ordinance should fix that use and should give the right financial incentives to people who want to use hangars for something else if that's what they want to do. So overall, that's how the ordinance works, and either myself or the chairman can answer any questions that you have about mechanics or how it works. Oh, I want to mention one other thing. Supervisor Bagwell sent me an email with a very good suggested improvement, very short but very good suggested improvement, which is if there's a use approved by the authority, it should be done in writing. And I think that's a great idea because we don't want to get down that path of somebody said it was okay, somebody else didn't. Do we really know? Let's get it in writing. And the writing might be as simple as an email from the airport manager or from the chairman or someone saying, okay, yeah, we've looked at this, is okay. But putting it in writing is a good addition. And so I've already incorporated that into the draft ordinance.
And with regards to inspections, Steve, could you just address that, or Linda, whoever feels more comfortable?
Let me talk about that. Every airport lease requires that the hangars be used for aircraft storage. The Carson City Municipal Code currently has, and has had for a fairly long time, the right of the airport authority, the airport manager, the fire department, the building inspector, all of those people to inspect hangars. The question becomes, when would you do that, and when would you allocate resources? Because candidly, if we took members of the building department, the fire department, and the airport staff out to inspect every hangar, that's at least a year's worth of man hours just for each one of those departments. And that's, A, we don't have the money for that. B, there's no reason to allocate resources to do that. So historically what we had done, particularly in airport managers prior to the current airport manager, the airport manager would do those inspections on an as-needed basis. If he or she had a complaint that there was some issue, he or she would go out, talk to the hangar owner, and in almost all cases, the hangar owner would cooperate. It was very rare that we had somebody who would just refuse and lock their door. And the one instance where we had that, we had the deputy sheriffs assist us in that. And it was a good thing we did, because that was a person who should have been on some medication and they were not. And when the person's wife found out, she jumped in and was really the hero of the day and bailed him out. But in the past, we have done inspections, and we do have a process for doing it. The inspection process that we adopted in Title 19 some years ago, adopted both by the Airport Authority and this body, tries to weigh the personal privacy issues against the public land issue. And so we try to have a basis for an inspection, not a willy-nilly, oh, I think I'm going to go out and inspect somebody because I don't like them or because I just want to today. To us, that's not a good use of resources. So that inspection right is in here. It's always been in here. We've utilized it in the past. And then more recently, we had a report from the FAA that they saw a problem when they looked into one hangar, and we authorized the airport manager to go out and inspect that hangar. As it turned out, he brought the building inspector with him, and they found some kind of wiring issue, some extension cord setup that they were not happy with, so they pointed that out and got that corrected as well. So we have done it before. The difficult thing that we have is when people make allegations, oh, there's 20 hangars out here that don't have aircraft in them. And when we go out, and the chairman went out personally on a Saturday, went into as many of those hangars that she could get into, every single one had an aircraft in it. The other problem is, if you open a hangar door, sometimes there isn't an airplane in it because the airplane is someplace else. It might be at the mechanic shop being worked on. The last time my airplane went in for an annual, it was like 10 days before I got it back. During that 10 days, my hangar would have been empty. We have some airport residents who own a house in Carson City and a business in Southern California or a business in Oregon. Those two I'm giving you are actual examples of people that I know here on the airport. They have hangars at both airports. So they have a place to park their airplane when they're in Carson City and a place to park it there. So, you may go in for several months at a time and not see an airplane in one of those hangars. Does that mean that it's not being used for aeronautical use? No. The FAA says you got to be reasonable about how you approach this. And the reason I mention this in part is because there seems to be this concept that what we need to do is just get out there and inspect every hangar. Well, that's not going to tell you what's really going on, just inspecting the hangars. So what we've crafted into our ordinance is a reporting process where each tenant, which includes all of the hangars in their tenancy, needs to report data to us. We can look at it, then we can challenge that data or follow up on it. And so if the data says, here are my aircraft, it's shown registered in Carson City, and it's here most of the time, we're okay. Now, if we find out later that was a lie, that someone was telling us, oh, I've got this airplane in here, but they never really did, our $1,000 a month rent surcharge kicks in. And so we're trying to do it, trying to police that portion of the self-reporting. Yeah, and so that's what the inspection does. In terms of some of the other things that Mr. Vaquero said, he's entitled to his opinion, and I don't deny him that in any way. But his statement that somehow we haven't enforced Title 19 for 20 years is just not borne out by the record. We've taken steps. Every time we've had a legitimate complaint and we've been able to identify that there's really evidence there, we've addressed it and corrected the problem. And in most cases, it's a misunderstanding, or there's misinformation, or someone just doesn't understand what they're supposed to be doing, and we sit down with them with Title 19, and it's an educational experience. But for the most part, we really don't have many problems out there, particularly with the hangar use.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Board, any questions? Lori?
So just as a thought process, would you not be able to recognize if you really had hangar use without an airplane based on the tax? So you have, I don't know, 200 hangars and 200 tax payments paid on an airplane, which means every hangar had an airplane. Is that not a simplistic double check that at least they have an airplane that's assigned to that hangar? Is that not one at least data check that you could do each year to know you have an overall compliance? They may be doing other things in the hangar that aren't appropriate, but you'd at least know there's an airplane per hangar from the tax.
That's a really good observation, and I'd like to say you're the first person who made that observation, but you're not. Somebody else did, and we did compare the numbers, and the numbers looked about the same. But then when we started thinking about it, some of the hangars, for example, the hangar that I share with another a pilot, we have 2 airplanes in our hangar. So it may be that some have multiple airplanes and some have none. And so as a ballpark check, that's kind of a good idea. But in terms of actually drilling down to find out if people are really in compliance, I think we have to go a step further than matching that up. The other thing is, you aren't required to register your plane in Nevada. So in the example I gave you before, where the gentleman's business is in Southern California, but his house is up here, I know that at least one of his aircraft is registered in Southern California, because I've pitched to him, hey, why don't you register it up here, because it's a nice airplane and I think it'll generate some decent personal property tax, but we can't make him do that. And what Title 19 says and what the leases say is, if you don't register it in Carson City, you've got to provide evidence of where it is registered so that we can see that it's actually a registered airplane. What we don't want is we don't want airplanes that are not registered stored in the hangars, because airplanes that are not registered are typically not flyable. There was another issue that was brought up kind of along those lines, which is what is a flyable airplane? Because some people restore older airplanes, and restoration processes frequently take a very long time. It's a hard time finding the parts or fabricating the parts you need to make it. And the FAA actually has a definition of active aircraft, which means it's flown 1 hour in a 12-month period. I think we would probably take a more practical view of it's got to work. But if someone came to us and said, this is what I'm restoring, and it's some beautiful 1930s airplane, we're clearly going to give them a lot more slack than somebody who's got a Cessna 150 that hasn't flown in 8 months and doesn't look like it's flyable. And so there is some discretion, and that's built into the ordinance too, because there's no way to have a bright line test of which airplane is flyable and which one isn't.
Thank you.
So, and then just as a follow-up, how often does the FAA come and review airport activity?
Not very often. Their staff is pretty limited, and their staff is more geared, well, they've got a bunch of different departments that are geared to different tasks, but they do have a division that does land use audits. And they, according to the federal code, they are to choose, I think it's a certain number of airports every 3 years, and our number came up this last year. And it may have come up randomly. It may have come up as a result of Mr. Vaccaro's complaints, because he was complaining to them. I don't think we'll ever know the answer to that, but we don't care. We like having the FAA come and give us advice. I mean, we don't always agree with them, but for the most part, it's an educational process for us, and it always results in an improvement to our airport.
John, did you have questions?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Tagus and Chairwoman Law, I sit on the Airport Authority with you and gone through much of this process, and one of the things I've said vocally several times is that if the FAA wants to come and inspect, they should come and inspect. That we don't, need to do. I don't like the stuff rolls downhill form of government, that we got to do their bidding for them. But by the same token, we get 95 or 96 cents on the dollar to put our cement out there, and they give us the money. So consequently, it's a good exchange. I've also said that if this board needs to, we may beef that inspection, and wants to, as a group, we might beef that inspection part of it up. But I concur with what you said about it's not a really good idea to use our resources over and over again. At the same time, I want to thank Mr. Vaccaro, because he's been a burr under the saddle since back when I was a newsman about this issue, and it has brought it. As you've said, it's a good thing. I might not have done it the way he did it, but by the same token, it's a good thing to have us be looking at our navel occasionally and seeing if there's any lint in it. Consequently, I approve of this, but with the caveat that we may go further into it, and I've said that in open Airport Authority meetings. Let me ask, though, the question that I have is, on this issue of is there a plane in it, it's not just is it out being worked mechanically, overhaul or whatever, but sometimes, as you say, people have hangars in two places. So they may be in the air, they may be at the other place. Is that one of the problems with this? And secondarily, piggybacking on that, is it also a problem that one of the concerns is, I'm sure by Mr. Vaccaro and perhaps others, that not only they do have an airplane in it, but they're using it for other things. I do know there are for example, bunks in them so that people can have a stayover and then fly on, things like that, and storing things in them.
Yeah,
And does this ordinance cover that?
The short answer is yes, it covers it, and that's a great observation. The FAA policy is very clear. The primary use needs to be for aeronautical use, and so long as that's satisfied, they don't care what else you store in the hangar. And so it's very common to see people who store their RV and their airplane in their hangar, and the test there is whether the primary use is for the airplane. So if the airplane is buried in a corner and the RV's in front of it, we and the FAA will both have a problem with that. If the airplane is front and center and the RV's out of the way, then that's not an issue. There are some airports that have taken a much stricter view, and that's their prerogative. Truckee, for example, which has got a very, very different setup than us. They own all the hangars. They built all the hangars. They put a lot of county money into their hangars. They have a rule that says all you can store in there is an airplane. Or if you're out flying the airplane, your car can be in there because that's how you got there. But beyond that, you can't store, boxes of records from your business or anything else that might be along the back wall that aren't interfering with anything. They have a problem with that. We are permitted by law, at least under the FAA policy, to go that far, but we've never gone there. And we think that would be a very hostile view to take toward our tenants, particularly since our tenants are the ones who put up all the money to build the hangars, and we don't want to have a hostile attitude toward them. The other thing is we will always have empty hangars on the airport. I mean, they're always in the state of being rented or being purchased and sold, and at any one time there will be some empty hangars on the airport. That doesn't violate the policy. The FAA is realistic enough to know that you're going to have some empty hangars from time to time. The problem would be is if you opened a hangar and you looked at it and there was no airplane and there was no way to have an airplane in it, then we would have an issue. But I think that message has been so well communicated to the pilot community right now, I'd be very surprised if we were ever to find that.
By the same token, the point about inspections is one of the ones that I keep going back to because of that 95 or 96 cents on the dollar we get. When I first came here, somebody told me this is a cowboy economy, and I think that's, to an extent, the attitude that we Nevadans have. We like to say, okay, there's a law, but, how do we find out what's inside those, short of inspecting them? I think Chairwoman Law called it maybe monitoring rather than inspecting, but what are the nitty-gritty details of how we do that? Because the city has that ground under it, has the vested interest.
Right, and so the way the ordinance approached is that once the ordinance is adopted, there's a 60-day window for all the hangar owners to get us their information on what aircraft are stored in there and their aeronautical use. So the first step is to collect that information. The next step is to go through that information and determine which ones do we go a step further. I mean, I can almost guarantee you in the string of hangars that are around me, you're going to get a report with a registered aircraft that shows it's registered in Carson City that we on the airport have seen flying in and out all the time. So that becomes kind of a no-brainer. But there may be others that we don't. So the first step is we collect the information. The trigger point on the information is not just this 60 days after the ordinance is adopted, but it's also on any change of use or ownership of the hangar. And when I talk about owning hangars, understand it's a condo ownership of just the building. The city owns and will always own the land underneath. There's no property tax on that because the city owns it, but we do assess property tax on the building. But those do change hands frequently. And I tell you right now, we've got a bunch of empty hangars. Tom Gonzalez has a bunch in his Jet Ranch development. And so that's how we're going to do it. We're going to collect the information, go further. And any place where it's warranted, we'll do the inspections. I mean, we're not.
Okay, Mr. Attorney, what does where it's warranted mean?
Well, I mean, it's where when we collect the information, either we don't believe it's credible or we don't believe it's sufficient, and when we ask for backup information, we're still not satisfied. Then the next step would be to look in the hangar. Chairman Law has something to add.
I might add, this is Chairman Law, that in March or April, we received a list of about 14 or 16 hangars that purportedly weren't being used for aviation purposes. Without notice, I went down to the airport on a Saturday. I got in contact with one of the people whose hangar was listed on that list, and he was kind enough to take me around on the north side of the airport to the hangars, to 4 or 5 of the hangars that were listed, and one hangar that wasn't listed on there, and the people voluntarily asked me into their hangars, and in every instance there was at least one airplane, and in 2 instances there were 2 airplanes in the hangar. True, there were other items in those facilities, but they did not impede the use of the aircraft that were within them. And my personal philosophy about the monitoring and inspection part is, if we have credible information that something is wrong, I think we should pursue that. I believe that the flying community in this town is important, certainly to the airport and certainly to the economy of the town. I don't particularly feel comfortable or desirous of going out and poking those people in the face, because we have a policy. I mean, if we have credible information that there's something going on, I feel more than comfortable going out and inspecting a hangar. Otherwise, I think that those people should have the quiet enjoyment of their property. In addition to that, the one thing that I would add on the development of this is that it was kind of a group project between both the airport manager, members of the board, and the users of the airport. And I think that they were all cognizant of the fact that we needed to comply with the FAA and its institution of the July 1st timeframe on this non-aeronautical use inspections, monitoring, whatever you're going to call it, program. And I think we've come to a really good, solid conclusion on a place to start. We may change it in the future. We may find that we need to tweak it somewhat, but at this point, I believe we have something that is useful and something that is conforming to the FAA requirements.
Final question, Mr. Takis. Was there a written complaint to the FAA that you ever saw or not? Or what prompted them to come in for that inspection?
Well, as I say, I don't know what prompted them to come in for the land use inspection, but I have asked the FAA repeatedly to send us copies of written complaints, and they say they have received none. They've received phone calls. They haven't received written complaints. As a result, the investigation path that they took was an informal process. I mean, it seemed pretty formal to me, but they call it an informal process.
Thank you.
And we were very responsive.
Any further board questions? Public comment on this issue? Anyone? Jerry?
Jerry Vaccaro, and I'd like to clarify some of Mr. Takis's testimony here. I am the individual that got the FAA to finally bring an inspection to Carson City after 20 years. There was no fire inspection, no building inspection, no hangar inspection, and I became aware through customers of the airport that there were non-aeronautical uses there. I indicated those to the FAA. It fell on deaf ears. I asked Mr. Takis to allow me, with the airport manager and a fire inspector, to have access to the airport, and he denied me. That's a public airport. But he denied me access to do what I wanted to do. Now, you have a fellow that helped him compose these regulations on the modification of Title 19, and his name is Eric Leach. Eric Leach came to me at my wife's business and complained that I was hurting a bunch of small people. He indicated to me that he had 3 hangars, only 2 airplanes. He had one that was dismantled, which will never fly, can never be repaired. He got the assessor to put no value on that airplane. He uses that hangar for a machine shop, a full-fledged machine shop. Where does that say in Title 19 that that would be permissible? Why is that hangar not been inspected a year after I filed the complaint? No inspection. So when I say you're receiving federal funds, you got over $30 million since 1998 of FAA money for the Carson City Airport. Mr. Takis's law firm has sucked out $900,000 in legal fees. Now, why, when a person complains, yes, I did not do it in writing to the FAA, but you know what? They listened to my phone call complaint, and I backed it up with information from there to verify. That's why they sent out Robert Lee to do his inspection. I volunteered my time to Robert Lee to point him in the right direction. He said he couldn't do that. I says, well, how, you know, if you're going hunting, you got a bird dog, okay? You're out there looking, you don't know what you're looking for. As a result, he found one hangar that he could peek through the door, and that's Mr. Appel. Okay? And Mr. Appel said that all he had was some extension cords laying on the floor, and he couldn't understand why the suspicion of his non-aeronautical use. Well, as a result of that inspection, he had heating, plumbing, electrical violations. And the other thing is, anybody that does anything in those private hangars on city property needs to have a licensed building contractor do the work, and they have to pull out a permit. And that's not being done. And that's why there's no inspections. Now, I pointed out a couple of fellows there that have Mr. Abendroth. He's a Corvette collector. He runs a Corvette resale business. And after my complaint was filed, he went out. He's a non-pilot. He went out and he bought an airplane to stuff in that hangar. Non-pilot. Put the airplane in there, so he met the thing. Then he appeared in front of the commission or the authority and asked, because he had a second hangar that I wasn't aware of, and he asked to be able to build a pilot's lounge in that second hangar. And I made a speech in front of the airport authority. I said, he must be tired of flying from hangar to hangar when he's not a pilot, and he already has a pilot lounge in the first hangar. Why does he need another pilot's lounge in this other hangar with no airplane? Has it been inspected? No. There's strings tied to the FAA money. And it says that they have to abide by every local, city, state, and federal law. That's the purse strings that are tied to that federal money. It's grant money. And she's the chairman, and she cannot validate if that's being done to this date, and my complaint is over a year old. She went on her own to investigate those hangars. The retired dentist, what's his name, Mr. Graber?
Brad Kramer.
Okay. He's got 12 or 13 hangars that he rents out. And half of them probably don't have airplanes in them. Had they been inspected by authority? Unannounced? No. So the modification of this Title 19, I think, is out of hand, because the one contributor to the most of these modifications is Mr. Eric Leach, who is one of the biggest violators with his machine shop in his extra hangar, storing just airplane parts of an airplane that'll never fly. And he's already had designation. He's had Dave Dowley, the assessor, come in and put no value on it. So he's not taxed for that. It's just old parts. Airplane will never fly. Your comment is very well taken. I made that over a year ago. I said, you know, it's an accounting situation. If you have 180 hangars, there should be more than 180 aircraft, because some of the hangars have 2 and 3 airplanes. Okay. So all it is a check and balance, okay? If you have 180 hangars, you should have more than 180 aircraft there. If they're saying that they're registering it in other states, prove it, okay? It's very simple bookkeeping, all right? And the assessor is the one that's responsible for collecting the personal property tax. So I think that the city has been cheated here for a long, long time. That was my reason for complaining. When I see the violations of the Corvette collector, the guys with the motorhomes and the boats and the motorcycles, and they're laughing at the city because that is the cheapest real estate that you can get in Carson City. Mr. Bonkowski's testimony is that that property is only worth 12 cents a square foot annual, and they give 50-year leases on it. Show me a piece of property in Carson City that I can lease for 50 years at 12 cents a square foot annual. It's impossible. But you accept the federal money, but you don't enforce all of the rules and regulations and laws. So this here, Title 19, should be tabled, should be set aside, and we need full disclosure, and we need to have the airport inspected by fire and building inspectors because you're being cheated out of the building permit process and you're not having licensed contractors do the improvements. That's it. Thank you.
Lori, you have a question?
I do. So, Jerry,
Yes.
if I am looking at the proposed ordinance, can you please point to the sections or areas in which you think there is insufficient teeth or that it does not meet the objective to allow for inspections? Because I actually like, from my point of view, the perspective of they are going to start that initial accounting methodology and make everyone prove up. So does this not actually start the ball to roll in the direction that you're interested in? It's probably not everything you'd like to say they're going to do an annual inspection, but does it not begin the accounting methodology that I'm even in discussion on, that everybody's going to prove it up to start?
Sounds good verbally, but if they couldn't enforce the original Title 19, how are they going to enforce this one? It's been 20 years. If somebody like me didn't bring it to the attention of the city and the FAA, we wouldn't be here at this table today. They're not enforcing, just enforce the original Title 19 and you have no problem.
Well, let's talk about that differently, though. What I'm asking you to tell me is, why shouldn't I approve? What's wrong with this proposal? I think this proposal moves you closer to where you want to go. So when you're asking me to deny it, that's what you're asking me to do today, is say, Lori, don't approve this. Well, then we go back to where they don't even get the provided proof to start at least the record-keeping audit.
My point with you,
Okay.
Chairman, Supervisor Bagwell, my point is, if you had Title 19 in position for 20 years, and you falsely accepted federal money to support the airport with not enforcing Title 19, okay? There's strings tied to those grant monies. So if you were unable to enforce Title 19, which was adopted by the Board of Supervisors and the Airport Authority, and they weren't able to follow through with their pledge, when you accept the money, the grant money, you become a sponsor. Okay, you're accepting that federal money and you're now the sponsor. And that liability as being a sponsor is to enforce Title 19. The FAA, his name is Tony Garcia, he's out of Phoenix or one or the other. I talked to Robin Hunt, I talked to all of them. They said the problem is within the city, they're not enforcing Title 19. So they put the blame on the city.
But the FAA hasn't come and told Carson City that we're in non-compliance of the grant condition.
It's still under investigation.
Oh.
The case is not closed. Okay? This comes from Robin Hunt, who is the regional director out of Southern California that has California, Nevada, and Arizona airports for general aviation. They are coming back, okay, because I have given them additional information, so there hasn't been full disclosure. So they're going to get to the bottom of it, okay? It can't be whitewashed, can't be swept under the carpet any longer. That money
I don't think there's anyone interested in doing that, Jerry. What I'm trying to have you help this board do is to begin the remedy process if indeed we have an issue. That's all you can do, right? If you're in a non-compliant situation, you bring yourself to compliance. And all I'm asking you, does not this proposed procedure begin to bring us to the compliance that you're interested in? And if not, what do I need to fix?
Yeah. Let me clarify. I have nothing against the people of the airport that are properly using it and abiding by Title 19. I have no complaints with them. It's the violator. There's less than a half a dozen or maybe 8 people that intentionally skirt the issues of Title 19 and have been continuously violating it, and those are the people that don't want inspections. Enforce Title 19 and you'll clear the table. Everybody else is in compliance. But you have people
pursuant to this procedure, you can write a formal complaint about the 6 or 8 that you suggest have an issue and submit it to the authority to request an inspection. The way I read this, so Jerry, I'm with what you want to do for compliance, and so why not write the letter to the airport authority requesting those 8 be inspected?
You heard of the round file? That's where it goes, in the round file.
No, I said requested of the authority in a public meeting.
I've appeared in front of the authority since 2005.
And presented.
And they have not brought it into compliance. They're exhausting me. I had this reporter, this newsman here, write articles on the hobby hangers. They did nothing to correct it. They did nothing to inspect them.
So
I've done my part.
We pass this today or in 2 weeks, and you wrote that to the authority, would you copy the city as well, the city managers, the city hall?
I'm going to give you all the communication that I have to the FAA and back from the FAA.
You have written now a formal written complaint?
No. They took my verbal complaint and they acted on it. You know,
you said you had more, Jerry.
Huh?
You just said you had more.
I'm gathering that now in defense of what they're trying to do, okay? And I will forward that to the city.
That's
okay?
Good.
All right.
That's all I'm asking.
I've communicated this with the city manager. We've had discussion after discussion. Believe me, it's not fun for me having to do this. I have better things to do, but it aggravates me because you're not following Title 19, that you accepted the sponsorship and the grant money to the tune of $30 million in 20 years, since 98, okay?
Jerry, thank you. The DA has her light on, so I need to give her a chance to weigh in here.
Sure, go ahead.
Madam Chair, you may be done with that, but I just wanted to remind everybody that this is public comment, so it's not meant to be a back and forth, and so that way you can finish with your hearing process and go to bring it back to the board for a vote.
All right.
Are we done?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board for any further comment.
I'll make a motion. Yeah, bill number?
Bill number 116.
I move to introduce on first reading Bill number 116, an ordinance amending the Carson City Municipal Code Title 19 Airport Rules and Regulations by adding section 19.02.020.370 to address permissible aircraft storage hangar use.
Second.
May I clarify that would include the correction that I submitted, that other use in writing? Because I think it's imperative everything be in writing.
Okay.
Yes, my understanding was that change had already been incorporated into the draft, so I would include that in my motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes.
On record discussion, I just wanted to say I'm going to vote for this because I think that it actually begins the first real checkpoint that will all be done in writing. every single hangar will be required to submit a proof. And so that begins at least the first round of the opportunity to know, to audit, to look if someone's falsifying information. And so I think this is a good first step. It might not be perfect. Further things might be needed, but it's certainly a step in the right direction.
Yes, I just want to clarify something that Mr. Vaccaro said too. He indicated that I said that the airport rent was the cheapest space in town, which I did not. I said that 12 cents a foot for a land lease was not only appropriate, but actually higher than you would find elsewhere in town.
Any further discussion, John?
Yes, finally, I would like to weigh in, and with what Lori said, I tend to agree. We have to start this process, and it's partly we have to start it because the FAA wants a policy from us and has indicated to us they want a written policy that we can get on the books. And as Lori mentioned, and I agree, and I've said it in the Airport Authority meeting, this may be just the first shoe to drop. Well, he may have to do more because this is city land. And finally, though, as I said before, I might not have done it the way Mr. Vaccaro did, I thank him for keeping this in our wheelhouse so that we can take a good swing at it.
And I just want to say I agree with the comments made here at the board. So we'll take a vote on this. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And one abstention, noting the mayor has abstained from this. Thank you. Moving on to item 15B. And Steve, will you take us through this one?
Yes, this is Steve Takis, Airport Council, and with me is Linda Lott, Airport Authority Chairman. This should be, I think, a little bit simpler to deal with. We renovated the terminal building. We have an unused wing of the terminal building. There is a flight school on the airport that currently operates. Actually, it's the biggest flight school on the airport. And they want to expand into that space. They want to lease 576 square feet of that area and some common area from us. They have offered us terms in a lease that we've negotiated that we think are attractive to the airport. We will end up with 100 megabit internet access, which we can use to replace expenses that we are currently paying for the airport. And as a result, we're entering into essentially a 5-year lease. The statute allows for leases under 25,000 square feet, which this is at 576 square feet is significantly less than that, but allows us to do a 3-year lease with an additional 2-year extension. And so I've distributed to you and I put on the back table some red lines of the lease. Supervisor Bonkowski went through it and found a bunch of areas that could be improved. And so he's given us red lines. And so I thought I would just run through those really quickly. We've changed the language on term. Instead of saying it's a 5-year lease, we're saying it's a 3-year lease that gets extended for 2 more years unless he notifies us he doesn't want to do it. On the second page, we are going to require the tenant to provide a scope of work and plans for his improvements to the space. We're not expecting much in this department. I mean, what we're expecting is for him to paint the walls and do some floor improvements, things like that, set up desks. His plan is to use this for flight instruction briefing areas. And so it's not, there's really, I'm sure there's a lot to do. There's always more to do than you think, but this is not major construction in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I'm not even sure he's going to need building permits. I don't think you need those to paint and do the stuff that he's doing. But if he does, then so be it. Possession. This is language that was suggested by Supervisor Bonkowski to address what do you do with stuff that gets left behind. And I understand now, talking to Supervisor Bonkowski, it's a little different than what I thought it was designed for. The tenant reacted very negatively to this change, saying, wait a second, if I don't get my stuff out in time, you guys get to keep it. And I don't think that's what, in talking to Supervisor Bonkowski, that's not the improvement he was seeking. He was seeking a mechanism for what do we do if it actually does get left behind. And so I think that his language is okay. I think we just need to tweak it and create a time frame so that the tenant has adequate time to remove his stuff before it's before it's treated as abandoned. And so what I'm going to suggest is that if the goods are not removed within 60 days after termination of the lease, then they're deemed abandoned. Okay, and then liability insurance, good catch by Supervisor Bonkowski. We had $1 million in here. It's really supposed to be $1 million per incident, $2 million in the aggregate, and so we've made that correction. There is a provision on destruction or condemnation of premises. We had in here that he would get a refund of his rent. Given that the rent is really $1 plus the provision of these access, I'm not really sure that really matters one way or the other, but we're happy to make the correction. And I think it makes the lease a little bit more consistent with other city leases, because I think the general view is we don't want to give refunds. In the holdover provision, now this is a really good observation by Supervisor Bonkowski. And I didn't realize it until I started looking at it and realizing, oops, the way that we had geared this up before, like most leases, it says if you hold over, you have to continue paying the rent. Well, what does that do for us here? If the rent was $1 plus the provision of these access, that allows the person to hold over indefinitely without having to pay anything. And so Supervisor Bonkowski inserted equal to the current fair market rent so that there's a number. My inclination was to put in something simpler because we're talking about such a small lease that to go out and determine fair market value is going to be probably a lot of effort, probably more effort than whatever number we're talking about. But my inclination is, without having a better idea, is to just leave it this way, and then we will temper our development of fair market value with the value of this lease. We're not going to go out and get an appraisal and pay, $4,000 to $5,000 to a commercial appraiser. And so my inclination is to leave it in. I asked the tenant for alternatives, and I didn't get a response to that. Remodeling and structural, again, Supervisor Bonkowski's changes are consistent with other city leases, saying if it's something that needs a building permit and you need to use a contractor, it needs to be a Nevada licensed contractor. Again, I think if there is work that needs to be done by a contractor in here, it'll be very minimal, if any, given that what we're talking about is painting. And then egress and ingress, it's maybe a more clear statement that if you have your invitees or customers on the property and they create some damage, you're responsible for their damage. Again, fairly standard. And then assignment and subletting, I think grammatically, I think the way Supervisor Bonkowski redlined it is probably superior to the way it was written. It says the same thing. And then he found a typo on page 9 where I'd put in corporation. In fact, it's a limited liability company, an LLC. I was just informed, by the way, that they have gone to nonprofit status for the LLC. I don't think it has any bearing on this, but I think it is a further indication that what this flight school is doing is a pretty noble thing for the airport. So with those red line changes, I would request that you approve this lease. Obviously, I have some work to do. I have to get the changes incorporated, get them back to the airport authority, and get agreement that these are non-substantive changes so that we can go forward. We're anxious to get him into the space. He had actually asked for the space initially last fall. We had worked through it, and this should have been put before the airport authority several months before it did. And when it finally got in front of us, we jumped on it right away. But there were some administration, airport management issues that prevented this from getting to the airport authority. So that's one of the reasons why when Supervisor Bonkowski said, hey, look, maybe we need to pull this, we would prefer not to pull it from the agenda. We would prefer to have you approve it with the red line changes so that we can take it back. If the tenant really has a problem with some of the red line changes, then we might be back in front of you, because then it may not go much further. But if we can at least have your approval in this format, then I think we can move forward.
Thank you, Steve. Board questions? John?
Sorry, for the verbal record as well as the written record, that this fight school is run by a member of the Airport Authority who recused himself during the time in which he presented it, and we approved it without his vote, and he is going to help develop the airport, hopefully.
Any other further board comment? Any public comment on this issue? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board.
The discussion point then is do we want to change possession to the 60 days? Because that wasn't in the red line, so I'm okay with the 60-day clause there. Okay.
Actually, you might look at that, Steve. I think it's 30 days by law.
That you have 30 days by law to remove your assets?
Right, at the end of a lease.
Okay.
Just check it.
Okay,
If it's
I'll
30
check.
days, fine. If not, 60 days is fine.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
Would anyone care to make a motion?
Actually, I missed one change. We had one of the changes, and it's really small, but it was kind of important. We had this right of first refusal provision in which we had given him 30 days, and Brad had recommended changing it, Supervisor Bonkowski had recommended changing it to 5 days. That discussion with him, he would really prefer to keep it at 30 days. Things don't move that quickly at the airport. Moving something to a 5-day trigger is not realistic in our environment. We would want to have him have some additional time to evaluate that other offer that we would have to do his right of first refusal.
My experience is that that's what a tenant always wants. They generally know whether they have a need to expand or extend a lease, and my concern, which I expressed to you, is that if you give them a 30-day first right, then there's a good chance that you may lose a potential tenant that's looking at that space. So I think there has to be a balance between, does it have to be 5 days? No. But there needs to be a balance between a period that's so long that you lose a tenant who's actually looking for a space and may need it immediately, and allowing a tenant to control a space for an extended period of time without giving notice just because they're not on the ball.
And I'm sensitive to that, but we're dealing with governmental entity approval here, so nothing's going to happen in 5 days. There's no process that can happen in government in 5 days. Notice of a public meeting takes several days. I mean, so we wouldn't have time to take it to the board.
It's just the tenant first right, or if it's only their notification. There's nothing required other than for him to say, I want the space.
Well, can we?
Splitting the
can we
difference and
count?
making it 15 days.
Let's make it 15, yeah.
So it's not so long, because I agree, you don't want to lose another tenant, so how about 15? So that,
All right, is there any further board discussion on this matter? Any further public comment on this matter? Seeing none, board, what's your pleasure?
you want a motion? I move to approve the airport terminal lease for flight school use of the west portion of the terminal building by Carson Aviation Adventures LLC pursuant to the red line version received today, with the change in possession being either a 30 or 60 day, whichever the law provides, and a change in section 27 from the red line version of 5 days to 15 calendar days.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And let the record show one abstention. The mayor is abstaining on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I think we'll just take a short 10-minute break, and then I will return the gavel to the mayor.
Bring the Board of Supervisors meeting back to order. As soon as we get settled here, we're going to take up item 16 Alpha. This is 16 Alpha and Bravo. This is fire. 16 Alpha to possibly approve an interlocal contract between the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District and Carson City, and to authorize the mayor to sign the agreement on behalf of Carson City. Who do we have? Oh, got the chief here. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
You guys been working overtime a little bit, huh?
A little bit.
Yeah.
TJ DeHaven, Battalion Chief.
Why don't you give us just as you start your presentation, just tell us a little bit what's happened over on these wildfires and where you got people, if you know them.
Over the last few days, it has been north, south, east. We even had a fire on Spooner. And yesterday was the first time we had lightning. So pretty busy. Friends and neighbors, everybody's got fires going. When we had a fire in Brunswick Canyon yesterday, day before. Completely BLM property. We had no resources from the federal government. So just our rigs and one rig from East Fork to attack that fire. Got it out 4 o'clock in the morning when we were all finished up out there. So it's been crazy.
On behalf of all of us in our community, thanks. I know you guys are stretched, and I know, that one at Brunswick Canyon was, I know we all got the message, that, we're stretched pretty thin, so if something that happened in Carson City, would be a little bit of a problem there. So anyway, but pass on to everybody, thanks.
I will do that.
Staying on top of stuff. Okay, now go on. What are we doing with the interlocal?
So today's just interlocal agreements, both items. One is with Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. It's just a continuation of the mutual aid agreement. We've had the same agreement for 5 years, signing to continue on the same thing. From what I understand, there was a question about the fee schedule, how it looks so different. Pretty easy to explain. On our agreement, for $400, you get an engine and the staff that's on it. In Truckee Meadows agreement, they say the engine costs this much and the personnel costs this much, and this much. That's really the only difference. Comes to be real close from what I understand. I didn't actually sit down and do the math.
Okay. Board, anybody? Public comment? Motion's in order.
I'll make it. I move to enter into an interlocal contract between the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District and the Consolidated Municipality of Carson City, and to authorize the mayor to sign the agreement on behalf of Carson City.
There's a motion and a second on a motion. Discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Let's take up the other interlocal agreement on 16. This is 16 Bravo. This is a companion interlocal contract and operating plan with USDI, United States Department of Agriculture, and the Toyabe National Forest Service with the Carson City and Carson City. Same thing. You want to just we've had this for how long?
5 years we've had this in place. This is the full 24 hours first response. It's all free. We work with them, they work with us, and then after that it kicks into a cost.
Supervisor Abowd.
I just want to, for the record, just state that I had contacted the Sean with regards to our fire chief, with regards to the expiration date on this, which actually expired in June, and I was concerned going into the 4th of July weekend that we didn't have protection, and he assured me that we did.
It just continues.
Yeah.
But the acting battalion chief this morning came to me, and we sent 3 overhead personnel to the Winnemucca fire for the Sierra Front team, and our contracts were not up to date. They do continue, but his first question to me at 7:15 this morning is, where are those agreements? Here they are.
Sometimes you got to do the paperwork as well as the fires. That's a little difficult sometimes.
Exactly.
All right.
Well, fire season kicked in just about a month early this year.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay. Public comment? Any board? All right, motion's in order. Supervisor Blenkowski.
I move to enter into an interlocal contract and operating plan between the Bureau of Land Management, USDA Forest Service, and the Consolidated Municipality of Carson City, and authorize the mayor to sign the agreements on behalf of Carson City.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. Thanks, Chief.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. All right. Let's take up item 17. This is the bullet that the legislature sent us to bite. This is the 5-year draft plan of the 911 surcharge master plan.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. For the record, Sheriff Kenny Furlong and Council Iris Yoll. If we lived in the South, it would be easy. Just Yoll.
Yeah.
I apologize that Ms. Keys, the chair for the 911 Surcharge Committee, is not able to be with us today, as well as Fire Chief Sean Slayman. But we will do the best that we can and introduce this. This is probably the first rewrite of a very, very short master plan that is presented to you. This is an action for approval for the 5-year draft, and I want to emphasize this is all in draft phase. 911 surcharge master plan for fiscal years 2018 through 2022 in accordance with NRS 244A 76 or .7641 through NRS 244A .7647 as presented by the 911 Surcharge Committee. I am going to introduce it as this. During this past legislative session, SB 176 became an issue proposed by the 2017 legislative session. It was signed into law by Governor Sandoval. The result of that law enforcement agencies, as defined by NRS 289.830, must require their uniformed peace officers who routinely interact with the public to wear portable event recording devices, otherwise known as body cameras, by July 1st, 2018. These body cameras will be worn by the officers while they're on duty. I would make a note that it's my opinion, and of course Iris is counsel for this act, that doesn't mean necessarily that on July 1st of 2018, poof, you're going to see a whole bunch of cameras, okay? But that is the goal.
It's definitely the goal, and I think it's the intent is to do as much as possible by that date.
Okay. The legislators recognize that the funding of body cameras for law enforcement officers will be a challenge. To fund implementation by July of 18, SB 176 included a revision to NRS 244A.7643 that allows the 911 surcharge fund to be increased up to $1 per access line and $10 per trunk line, with this money to be used for public safety enhancements. The surcharge amount is currently and has been since 2008 set at 25 cents per access line and $2.50 per trunk line. Carson City Municipal Code 4.05.070, doing pretty good. The revenue that will be generated as a result of the current surcharge amount is estimated at $208,000 per year. Along with the intent of SB 176, there was an acknowledgement statewide that the 25-cent levy on the 911 surcharge fee was wholly inadequate to fund the necessities or the intended purposes of the master plans for all 911 centers statewide. The current line item needs of reporting and responding to emergencies. Even without taking into consideration the requirements of the new law, it is estimated that $285,726 in revenue will be needed from the general fund for the fiscal 2019, I stand a correction on that page, 2019, to meet the pre-SB 176 needs. That is to say, even excluding the body camera implementation, those needs are still there. Therefore, the 911 Surcharge Committee, we met and did a recommended rewrite of the master plan and proposed, or I should say washed, the budgeting 5-year plan. That process was done from the bottom up. In other words, it was not keyed in on a dollar amount. To coin a phrase. It was more, what are the needs, what are we allocating, and how are we paying for those needs as it applies to the 911 center? So it was really a bottom-up process, and we're going to, as we proceed through this, have Ms. Kathy Hughes, who's retired out of the sheriff's office, who has volunteered her time on the 911 surcharge committee as a non-voting member, to access the city records and financial data in order to give you the best what's the word for it? Open information for the public to see. The updates in the 911 surcharge master plan achieved three primary goals, and that's what the committee was primarily focused on. The number one goal is to provide a stable and adequate funding source for the operation of the 911 communications center and its infrastructure. That goal is to maintain an ending fund balance so that you, the board, are not placed in a position such as you were just several months ago, where an unanticipated occurrence or contract needed to be let out of cycle, and that places you folks in a very, very difficult position. Goal number two was to avoid the need for future allocations of the general fund for the same operational costs. The goal was to reduce the impact of 911 on future general fund necessities. And the third item was to provide funding for the implementation of audio-video recording devices for law enforcement personnel required by the passage of SB 176, otherwise known as body-worn cameras. For those who have studied it well, there is a reference in the SB 176 to car cameras as well. In the 5-year plan, we are not projecting it, we are not asking for it, and we do not, as you will see when we go through the financial 5-year plan, we don't see that even at a recommended $1 assessment fee, that's even going to be feasible. The 911 surcharge increase is accomplished through an ordinance change. Therefore, this being presented today is a draft. Approval of the draft 911 surcharge master plan is a prerequisite to the ordinance change. Additionally, approval of this draft master plan will provide enough information so that an accurate business impact statement required by us to be presented to you can be drafted and disseminated. Once all are completed, staff will return to the Board of Supervisors for final consideration and an appropriate surcharge amount to be incorporated into Carson City Municipal Code 4.05. So the process is we wanted to bring this draft plan to you today so that you could see it and we could prepare a business impact statement, then return to the board with a business impact statement where we will make a recommendation as to the assessment fee, which you will also hear here in a few moments, and then incorporate those changes into the municipal code required by the legislature for it to be enacted, and we can proceed forward. Any questions? Okay.
We do have Supervisor Bonkowski has a question or comment.
Yes. Yes, Brad.
Hey, Kenny. I just wanted to, as you asked me to, put my suggested changes on the record. So if you turn to page 2 of the master plan under goals, item 6, I wanted to add language to clarify that we can use the funds for the maintenance and operations of the audio-video devices as well. So that line should read, to ensure compliance with NRS 289.830 for equipping and maintenance operations of audio-video devices to public safety entities. Then on page 9, under item 5, the last item.
Did you have these, Iris?
Brad, Mr. Bonkowski,
have you seen these changes?
The page numbers are really messed up. I don't know how that happened. I'm going to blame it on the computer. Could you help us out here?
Sure.
Sure.
She's got you.
You got the one. Did you get my email? I'll give you a copy of my email.
I didn't receive your email. When
Okay,
did you send
that's
it?
fine. I wasn't sure if it was forwarded to you, but
Okay.
if you want to come up and grab this, this has. It's the bottom paragraph. I don't need it back. You can have it. Okay. So on page 9 or 251 in the supervisor packet, page 9 of the draft, under item 5, which is the last item on the page. Again, what I'd like to do is to add subsections A and B, which will be copies of item 1A1 and 1A4 on the previous page. So the first sub-item A would read, paying reoccurring and non-reoccurring charges for video event recording devices. And sub-item B would be paying costs associated with any maintenance, upgrade, and replacement of equipment and software necessary for the operation of the digital video devices. And then finally, on page 11 of the draft, in item 4B, or actually it's just item B, about a third of the way down the page, in a county whose population is less than 400,000, that should actually say in a county whose population is less than 40,000.
And Supervisor Winkowski, what we will do is that once we finalize the draft, and for everybody's knowledge, we will present the final version with the first reading of the ordinance so that you have that.
And then the amounts will be changed in that draft as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. And now we would like to explain the process and 5-year budget master plan, which is an attachment to the required document.
Thank you. Good morning. Kathy Heath for the record. Before
Where have you been, Kathy?
What's that?
Where have you been?
I've been retired.
Huh?
Retired. The sheriff is somewhat persuasive, so I'm back.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Before we look specifically at the spreadsheet that's on the wall, I want to go a little bit further and let you know about some of the processes that we used to develop this budget. Okay, the first thing that we did really was look at the current status of the fund and does the current fee support the current needs? The answer to that was no. So since we're attempting to align expenditures with their proper funding structure, revenue stream, we looked at the general fund to see what is in the general fund that are that expenditures that qualify to be included in the surcharge. We'll talk about it a little bit more in a few minutes, but those items on that spreadsheet that are currently in the general fund are the ones that you see in red. Those expenditures are in the sheriff's office budget, IT's budget, and the fire department's budget, primarily. Once we did that, we took a look at the needs of the fund, or the needs of the center, today and in the future. One of the goals was to start to build some reserves for equipment replacement or other major capital needs for the center in the future. So you're going to see that in not year one of the plan, because there wasn't any money in year one in the plan, but in years 2 through 5 of the plan, you'll see a little bit of accumulation for those. Once we did that, we attempted to find a cost associated with the body cameras. The goal, we took a look at the Senate bill, we focused on what it was required, not what the bill allows. As the sheriff said earlier, there's no provision here for vehicle cameras. We focused on what was required, not what is allowed. And to the best of our ability, we assigned a cost to the body cameras. We're expecting that in year one to be a little over $110,000, assuming a 5-year contract. The subsequent years is for data transfer and storage. That's the big cost associated with this, and that's about $100,000, $95,000 or so per year. So once we did that, we have a good sense of what today's and the future's expenditures are going to be. Then we took a look at the revenue and determined what do we need in order to fund that. So with that, if we see what's in the budget, just a little overview, if that's, unless there's any other questions before we do that. Okay. As an overview, what's in the budget? Current charges, obviously, everything we're paying today is in the future. We've added the upgrade the sheriff mentioned earlier to the 911 system. That was subsequently was going to be paid out of the general fund. If we move that to the surcharge, that'll be a savings there. We've added a cost for the body cameras. We've also added the connection between the 911 system and the computers in the cars. What pushes that information, what pushes that call information out to those cars? And that's the MDC connection that you'll see in the budget. And that's between the sheriff's office and the fire department's budget. And then we've included other, that we talked about earlier, needs of the center, such as Smart 911, text to 911. Those are, again, those are phase-in, because not everything can come in year one. That's a general overview. Are there any questions?
Supervisor Bagwell, go.
Yes.
So I really want to thank you for the presentation and the clarity that you brought to the spreadsheet so that the public is well aware of what they're going to get and what the potential of a fee increase would pay for. So I really appreciate all your hard work to do that, because it really provides the roadmap and gives the public the information, and that it's clear that even though the legislation and the potential to increase the fee to $1 could allow us to work for vehicles, that it still is insufficient money in Carson City. The dollar still wouldn't even raise enough to get to vehicles. So it's important that the public not expect that this board's going to be looking at vehicle cameras, because there simply isn't the money to do that. The items in red really also give this board an opportunity to properly fund expenditures from the right accounting sources, and at the same time give us an opportunity. So I'm just putting it out as a thought process for all of us when the final versions come forward, is to maybe having a couple $100,000 to put into infrastructure roads. So I'm just putting a plug out there for John, no, but for an opportunity like we did a year ago or so, where we did $300,000 for the road fund. This might be a ongoing funding source opportunity as we free up this general fund. So no decisions today or anything, because obviously these are just drafts, but I'm just putting it out on the record that we might have a chance to help those funds.
Thank you, Supervisor Bagwell. I appreciate your comments, and you're right. And the good part about it is you have some time to do that. Those significant general fund changes don't come till fiscal 19.
John, Supervisor Barrett.
Thank you. I often say what she said, but I'll say what she said and then add more. Lori and this board, minus me, previously has gone in search of funds to help with the roads, and this looks like another area we can at least look at some point. And frankly, I will be looking at any funding source we can. We've already talked about some other ones. And so thank you, because, but I do have a couple of questions that don't have anything to do with that. One is, and looking at it, I may have not understood or missed it. How many vendors did you look at? Was this just based on one vendor or several vendors, or those estimates that you've made sound like they're pretty well thought out?
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Prior to the legislative session, we had been exploring vendors, a number of vendors, but on the advice of the city, Laura Rader, once SB 176 became law, we have backed off from all vendors, because we enter into an approach of RFPs, selecting the appropriate vendors. So it is a challenge. We want to do it right. We want to do it right the first time. And so once it became law, these are now estimates as far as it comes to the type of vendors that we would choose.
So based on some industry standard, though, you've done your research and due diligence as much as you can.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Secondarily, the question I have is, and you're in law enforcement, so you would know, I don't. Which is better, body cameras or car cameras?
That's an excellent question, and I will speak on behalf of Mr. Woodbury, the district attorney, because he and I have had that conversation specifically. It's a challenge. Body cameras, the video portion, only capture that information that the camera is pointed at. And obviously, we all know that is less than perfect. In fact, the greater advantage is on the audio side. Because from the audio portion, we will be able to retrieve it all. So when an incident does occur, which departs from the source of the recording device, such as a car, or is, let's call it a foot pursuit or a foot activity away from that source, we're still able to capture a good deal of the information. Mr. Woodbury is strongly in favor of this. He believes that it will be a benefit to the city, as well as the public safety entities here in resolving some issues.
Other board comments or questions? On cars, it's interesting to note that Volvo just said an announcement that in 2019 they will go all to battery or hybrid cars. So it's happening. I mean, we got to find ways to deal with this stuff. So, all right. Public comment on this issue? Anybody want to weigh in? All right. Motion's in order then. We'll take a motion. That's on a draft, so we'll see where it goes.
I move to approve the 5-year draft with the changes that were entered for the record on the 911 surcharge master plan for fiscal years 2018 through 2022 in accordance with NRS 244A.7641 through NRS 244A.7647 as presented by the 911 Surcharge Advisory Committee.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay, let's take up the 18 finance, the potential of a $6 million bond for sewer projects. Ms. Paulson, welcome back from vacation.
Thank you. So this is just the next step in the process of issuing up to $6 million in sewer bonds. The issuance of these bonds was approved by the Debt Management Commission on June 19th. Upon approval of this resolution, it will begin the required 90-day petition period upon publication of the notice intent in Sunday's paper. And then the next step in the process will be the public hearing, which will be held on August 17th.
Supervisor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to take a moment, not more than a moment, to thank the other members of this board who were here when all this transpired that got us to this point with this $6 million, and I think a previous board. Fixing this plan has just been a big project, and it was a big need. So thank you, guys, and I'm just glad we're here to do the next step.
Okay. As they say, if we don't fix the plant, well, it's a pretty bad day. They use some other word.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Moving right along.
Public comment? Seeing none, we've talked about this. Supervisor Bonkowski, you want to make a motion? Is that what you're doing, or you want to comment?
No, I'll make the motion.
Go.
Sue, is it R29?
It is, yes, it is.
Okay. I move to adopt Resolution 2017-R29, a resolution of intent proposing the issuance of and authorizing the publication of notices relating to general obligation limited tax sewer bonds, additionally secured by pledged revenues in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $6 million for the purpose of financing sewer projects for the city, providing the manner, form, and content of the notices, authorizing the city manager or the city's chief financial officer to arrange for the sale of the bonds, and providing the effective date.
There's a motion and a second on a motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. A 2/3 majority, unanimous. Thank you. All right. Let's take up, I think we're going to pass, Mr. City Manager. Oh, you want to do it? Okay, I want to try and get through everything we can. Go ahead. Let's go. We'll see where it goes. Okay. We may go, I want to try and give us a lunch break here today, so, and I know we've got another, the stormwater stuff coming up, but go ahead. And
Okay. Good morning, Mayor,
Scott.
Board of Supervisors. With me is our Chairman of the Open Space Advisory Committee, Mr. Bruce Scott. I know you've had a long morning. I did bring a presentation. This first presentation is only 7 slides. The next one is 5. I did want to respect your time, but I wanted to share with the public some of our highlights from last year and also for this coming year.
As they say in the Happy City book, when you look at green, things change. That's good. All right, go.
Okay, similar to the presentations this morning, last year when I presented the report to the Open Space Advisory Committee, one of our members said, yes, your report's nice and it's great to acknowledge all of our projects, but specifically, let's add a category and acknowledge our grants and our volunteers. So this first slide just shows that in 2016, we were awarded more than $2 million in grants. Obviously, one large grant, and next year we'll start the environmental studies and the design on those projects. The next few slides are just recognizing the volunteers that have helped out the open space program. This morning, Jennifer Budge did say that the organization of the year is to the Carson High School ROTC for their efforts on the Carson River cleanup event. Last year, or actually for the last 2 years, we've had more than 200 students out along the river, so that makes a huge difference. The Church of Latter-day Saints, Eagle Scouts, and the White Trash Brigade have also contributed to our cleanup efforts. The White Trash Brigade, these are motorized enthusiasts with the big Jeeps and big trucks, so they're able to get back into some of the canyons that we simply can't. And when they conducted a cleanup last year, they filled up one 30-yard dumpster and still had more to come. And that's one of the reasons that in the cleanup, that Waste Management was recognized for their efforts on donating dumpsters to us. Muscle Powered conducts a monthly trash cleanup event around town. It's only a 1-hour trash mom. So they have conducted that on some of our open space properties. And then last year was the first year they also did a weed dig of bull thistle up on Horse Creek Ranch. And that's coming up later this month. And then we also do numerous activities and events. Your report has many more, but again, I just want to highlight a few. So National Trails Day is held in June, either trail construction or trail maintenance. And then Silver Saddle Ranch last year, we had 7 events. It was the inaugural Jazz and Beyond Music Festival venue out at Silver Saddle, and they will be repeating that again this year, held on August 13th. One of the notable capital improvement projects was a wetlands enhancement down at the old Buzzy's Ranch. In land management, Ash Canyon Road, we do annual maintenance. With the storm events this year, it has suffered significant damage, and it is closed this year. We installed a new gate, so people are not able to drive up the road to Hobart Reservoir for fishing. If you do get any of those phone calls, you can direct them to me. I just don't have a time frame right now when we can fix it, but FEMA has been out there to take a look at that damage. Fuels management with the sheep and park ranger patrols. Last year was the first full year that we had a dedicated park ranger for open space properties, and that is making a significant difference, particularly in the canyon. A lot of education and outreach to the regular folks out there to notify them it's now public property. Target shooting is not allowed. We did have a target shooting fire out there already this year, about a month ago. It was a small fire. And then a lot of the dumping and camping that occur out on the properties. And that's all I have for this first agenda item.
So just a question on the vehicle that was pulled out. So were we able to get the VIN number and recover anything for that? So we don't pay?
It depends. If we have information on the vehicles, we do try to recover our funds from the insurance companies.
What did we do with the blue one?
This one
the truck?
I can't recall
Oh, okay.
because there have been so many.
Oh, oh, that's sad.
Additional comments or questions on the report? Mr. Scott, shoot, go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. Bruce Scott, Chairman of the Open Space Advisory Committee, and I just wanted to say on behalf of the committee, thank you to this board for the support and for your help and inputs in taking what we bring to you as an advisory recommendation forward. We're proud of what's happened. We've had a pretty successful year. Unfortunately, our open space did suffer from the winter, and we're working now to not only try to get a handle on exactly what the extent of that damage is, but begin the process of getting FEMA monies to try to help mitigate. So we'll be back, I'm sure, to try to address some of those issues. But thank you very much.
Yeah, well, just a second, John, I'll get to you. Mr. Scott, let me just say this, that we also have a full agenda today, and I don't want you or your board to think that we're giving things short shrift. But what it does tell you is that we have an immense amount of confidence in you guys, what you've done. You've done a great job since 1996, and keep it up. So that.
Thank you.
If we're moving fast, don't take that as something that we're not concerned. Take it as a compliment that we trust what you're doing. Okay. All right. Supervisor Barrett.
Just want to add to that thank you for your personal contribution, both on this committee and on the Utility Finance Oversight Committee. You are a stellar citizen.
Thank you.
Okay. Public comment? Board? Supervisor Bagwell, make a motion.
I move to approve the Open Space Advisory Committee's annual report for 2016 and commend them for their work.
Motion and a good second, and a good motion. Good motion and a good second, okay? Put the good in the right place in both places. All right, on the motion, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, carried. Okay, let's take up 19 Bravo. This is the work plan for the next fiscal year. Ms. Bollinger and Mr. Scott, go.
Thank you, Mayor. And this presentation just has about 5 slides, I believe. But also, this is a time for the board, if you have suggestions and recommendations from your side to send back to the Open Space Advisory Committee and staff, please do so. So our 3 main projects that we're working towards this year, towards capital improvement, is the Golden Eagle Lane Prison Hill Recreation Area Erosion Control Project. The Public Works is helping us right now to get quotes on that project, and we hope to start construction probably in a month or 2. That's at the south end, again, an area that was impacted from past storm damages. The Prison Hill Recreation 5th Street Trailhead, this is right there by the roundabout at 5th Street in Fairview. The previous report said we have, it was awarded pending environmental review. That has cleared, so I should be back to this board in a month or 2 to accept that grant award of $200,000. And so we'll start design in the Carson River Trail System. The environmental studies and design will also start on that project. Land acquisition, so last year we did not close on anything. This year I hope to at least close on one, maybe Michael Fagan on Highway 50. And then, so that would be a fee title acquisition. And then the one on the left, the Old Woods Ranch LLC, we're looking at just acquiring a conservation easement. The family doesn't really have an interest in selling, but it's also a benefit to us that if we have a land manager, we're at least purchasing a conservation easement to keep the land open in perpetuity, protecting the wildlife habitat, the forest, and the alpine meadow. Some of our planning activities and reports include federal agency plans. I don't know if you all remember several years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we came forward with the BLM Resource Management Plan. I believe the final document will be presented to us this year, and then we will bring that to the board. Ordinances. The Open Space Advisory Committee has been working on ordinances, and with our Deputy DA Iris Yule. Those have been approved from the committee, and Iris is working on some of the final edits. The difference here is we do have Chapter 1306, which helped form the open space program. What we don't have in Chapter 1306 is the rules and regulations, something for enforcement on those lands. We will be working on a signage master plan today. The RFQ closed, so we will be hiring a consultant to help develop an official look to our signage on parks and open space. Trails, just to continue agency coordination and planning, and then vehicle access / recreation, particularly at the south end of Prison Hill. We will conduct a trails inventory and assessment. That's all I have. I said I'd keep it short.
Bruce.
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, Bruce Scott, Chairman of the Open Space Advisory Committee. Just very briefly, our committee is trying to balance the wheels of government turning slowly and the need for patience. And it's a challenge because we've got a lot of folks that really want to see some things happening, and we've got some good people that don't always understand, some of the details. But the other side of it is we have a very limited staff. We're working in a lot of different areas. You don't get $2 million worth of grants by sitting around talking about weeds. It's a hard balance, and we're working to try to strive to balance that. But you'll get some concerns, and they're not wrong to be frustrated, but we are making good progress. We do think we have a good program, and we're adding some really good people as we carefully add to the staff for the management portion of what is our really long-term effort. So feel free to direct people to me, or if you have questions, let me know if I can help. I'm happy to try to do that. And Ann, of course, takes care of most of that. But we're certainly available as committee members to try to help move this along as well. So thank you.
And the only comment I have, and thank you for your presentation, I appreciate all that you do on open space. On Silver Saddle Ranch, one of the part of the work plan is to begin a site development plan, and I'd really like to encourage that for larger events, concert events, things of that nature. I mean, it's a beautiful setting. It's perfect for that, and we're limited in terms of places where we can do those things. So I think that I'd just like to encourage that.
Okay. Anybody else? Supervisor Barrett.
Just quickly, yes, thank you, Ann, and I also throw in a word for Muscle Powered and Jeff Potter on the trails part of it, and all the things you guys do, because it's coordination between government and private private citizens who are interested in this. So convey to them our appreciation.
And when you come back, you'll tell us how we should hit the balance between government and work, okay? That's your task, Bruce, so, all right. Public comment, anybody? I don't see any. Supervisor Abel, make a motion. Go.
I move to accept the recommendation of the Open Space Advisory Committee and approve the work program outline for the fiscal year 2018.
Second. Motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Okay. Let's take up the item 20. This is stormwater management, potential funding. Mr. City Manager, I'm going to see where we go here. I don't necessarily want us to eat. I want to give us a lunch break if we can do that. So I'm going to try and, get us out of here between 12:15 and see where we are. So if there's people out there waiting, we might want to take that up again, right again at 1 o'clock, or what? We're back here at what's the notice say? 1:30. So we might want to. We'll push stuff to 1:30 so we get a chance to get out and get some air and stuff like that. So it's my intention to try and start closing things down at 12:15 if we're not done before that. All right, let's go.
Morning, Mayor, board members. David Bruchetta for the record. No controversy here, so we could just go right to the chase, huh? Just a high-level overview. I know that most of you are very familiar with this information. A lot of this is just for the public. We'll quickly go through it and then talk about the different funding options. So the outline today, talking about the current program and the elements of it, a little bit on the history, some expenditures, where the money's currently going, and the current rate structure. And then we presented some information to the Utility Finance Oversight Committee and what their proposed rates and capital improvement plans are. And then we'll discuss, there's a multitude of different funding options that we could use, and that's the last part of it. So starting in the late 1990s, a committee, a 7-member committee was formed called the Storm Drain Advisory Committee, and it was a committee put together with multiple consultants, and they worked on the current stormwater program we have now for about 4 years. So there was a lot of work that went into that. Once they made the rate recommendations, the stormwater plan was adopted, and the plan was initially put together to meet the elements of what we call the MS4 permit. That's a permit issued. We're required to have it as per NDEP. And since then, there's been a couple of renewals from the permit. Each of the renewals comes more work, more responsibilities put onto the city.
So the elements of the current program, at the top, the National Flood Insurance Program, these are just some of the components that are associated with it, but it is a FEMA program that we adhere to. The community rating system helps to do with insurance requirements. It exceeds the flood insurance program requirements. That's another element we have within our stormwater management program. And then the MS4 permit, which is actually issued through NDEP. And one of the issues when we first started the funding program, it was specifically put forth for the MS4 permit, and these other things were added on top that do benefit the community. So where does some of the money go? So here's a pie chart. I see it's kind of hard to read up there, but we broke it into some elements to give some people general understanding. Stormwater quality. We spend, it's part of the operational dollars there. I have to put my glasses on here. So this year we're spending, this is an approximation, just about $130,000 associated with stormwater quality issues. Floodplain management, which are the CRS and NFIP requirements, we're spending about $169,000. Again, these are just approximations because they really come out of an operation and maintenance budget. Debt service, this is one of the largest components, and as we've moved this along through the years, this is a component that was never funded, and that's where we're having the challenges because you can see it's a large piece of the pie. Operations and maintenance covers salary, benefits, services, and supplies, and the capital improvement plan. And so going into this fiscal year, we don't have funds for capital improvement plans. The other thing on this slide that I want to point out, though, is the reserve, $270,000. That was another element that was put in through the financial policies, the Utility Finance Oversight Committee, that was never part of that picture either. So there's reserves for emergency type actions. Rate structure. There's been quite a few questions on this. So the current rate structure for a stormwater comes from the Municipal Code, Chapter 12, and it talks about, here's the rate policy. The important thing in the rate policy, it's defined in Title 18 of the Carson City Municipal Code. So stormwater's in Section 12, and it refers to the zoning properties, which is in Title 18. So here are the current stormwater rates, and it talks about the 5 different rates: single-family, multifamily, public, manufacturing, and commercial. And then those definitions are actually in Chapter 12, but they refer you to Title 18. So there's a connection between those two. And so when people think of single-family, it's important to know in the stormwater that it is based on zoning per parcel, and these zonings are defined in the Title 18. So for single family, it lists what the zonings are. For multifamily, again, there's multiple zonings associated with it: public property, manufacturing, and commercial properties associated. So each one of these have multiple zoning elements. So when a new property comes on board, we look at what the zoning of the majority of that property is, and then that dictates what the rate charge would be. So this is some information that comes out of our financial system, the SunGuard HTE system, and it shows there's about a little over 16,600 properties. The majority of those, about 90% of those, are residential, single-family properties. About 2% are accounted for multifamily properties. About 1% are for public properties, 2% for manufacturing, and 5% fit into the commercial category. So what we did is we presented to the Utility Finance Oversight Committee back in March. Staff made a recommendation of a 2-year rate plan to help generate enough funds to support both operations and a 10-year capital improvement plan based on the pay-as-you-go system. And what it was a 2-year plan with a 40% rate increase over 2 years. After further discussions with the Utility Finance Oversight Committee, their recommendations back was some changes to that plan. And what they proposed was a 3-year rate plan, the first year being a 25% increase, the second year being a 35% rate increase, and the third year being a 35% rate increase. What this slide shows you is that under the current program, we generate about $1.4 million in revenue. With the proposed, and of course these were all calculated taking effect July 1, so these numbers wouldn't be that accurate, but it's going to generate about $1.745 million, and that's an increase of about just under $350,000. And the proposal is that about 20% of that would go to operating fund, help cleaning ditches maintenance and operation activities, and about 80% would go to capital fund. And you can see that's where it would go over the next 3 years. And then if you look over a 10-year period, which that's what the capital plan is, you know, it would generate this, the UFOC proposed program would generate just under $30 million, or about double. 15 million of that is in increased revenue. Of that 15 million, 3 would go to operating, to do operating, to fix operating issues, and about 80% of that would go to a capital plan, just under $12.5 million. So the capital plan, a 10-year capital plan, and these stars just show the major components that we looked at for the next 10 years, and you can see they're kind of all throughout the city. Here's a list of the projects for just a little over $12.3 million. These are, a lot of these, especially as you get out in the future years, you know, until you dig the area up, you're going to know these are just best estimates at this point. But they're, you know, they're approximations for about $12.3 million. That's where we propose spending the money. So really getting into it, you know, we're back here talking about how do we fund a program like this. You know, we can just take our current program, make no changes to it. We can adopt the utility finance oversight recommended rate plan. And one of the things we were directed to is bring back rate consultant options. And in your plan, in the staff report, you know, we brought back different options. There's all kinds of different options we have with that. You know, we can start with a small program, a $50,000 program where the rate consultant looks at just certain aspects of it. It can be more comprehensive, $100,000, $150,000, that's going to get into a lot more of the details, or a complete full-blown program that we're estimating in the neighborhood of about $250,000. So there's a lot of different options we have, and even within their sub-options, so we'd just like to get your feedback and see what your thoughts are, and talk more about this.
While we're here at this juncture, any public comment on this? Yes, sir, come on up.
I think we're still before noon, so good morning. My name is Andrew Fromdahl. I'm a resident in Northwest Carson City.
We got your letter.
Oh, thank you. Glad you got it. I'd just like to share a few points that I have. In my opinion, the current stormwater rate structure is too simplistic in that it unfairly lumps vastly different properties into similar billing categories solely based off zoning groups. Based on my research, for example, in multifamily property category, a 5-unit apartment complex could be charged the same as a 125-unit apartment complex if they're both on a single parcel. For commercial rates, you could be a 60,000 square foot building with 600 parking spaces, or you could be a tiny office downtown with 5 parking spots, and again, pay the same rate if you're on one parcel. For me personally, my residential office parcel that I use for a residence is unfortunately billed as commercial with no flexibility despite the diverse zoning and land use. Please tell me that my house is not paying the same stormwater rate as Walmart's 19-acre parcel. I mean, it's a nice big store with lots of cheap deals, but I'm sure our stormwater impact differs just a little bit. The stormwater fee structure should better reflect the service it is designed to operate. Before making any changes to the rates themselves, please use more available parcel data to create a fee structure that makes sense and bills parcel owners fairly and truly, and that truly reflects stormwater impacts. Thank you very much.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your letter, and thanks for being brief. We got it. We understand. All right. Let me ask you, did the Utility Financial Oversight Committee look at any other funding mechanism other than pay-as-you-go, such as bonding?
At that time, that was not part of the presentation.
Have your staff looked at any? I mean, we'll see where this goes. I mean, you know, is there a bonding alternative that's possible that would solve it? Because one of the things, you know, I understand the issue for rate design and things like that. I also understand the issue of we got to get things done here, and I'm worried about another year delay, and particularly if we have another bad year in floods. So I'm worried about that. So I'm trying to find a way if we could, you know, for lack of a better word, split the baby and say, okay, maybe there's a minor increase here and then bond for, you know, whatever. And I don't know if that analysis could be done or is done or what. And I'm just throwing that out. So.
Mayor Darren Schultz, Public Works Director for the record. Thanks for bringing that up. And we've been working, staff's been working, we've also been working with finance to try and, over the last month, come up with a solution, a compromise of getting us out of our current dilemma, but not setting us up for the next 20 years. And in no way is this a Band-Aid. This is just, let's solve the issue of the train right immediately in front of us and not put us in a box for the future years. So one of the things an option that we have been kicking around is it's true, and finance has talked about this over the last couple of months, that bonding right now it's really, really cheap money, and we would be remiss if we did not make that part of our equation and our thought process options moving forward. So the program that we've been kicking around, or an iteration thereof, would be raising the stormwater rate one time now to an amount that will, and that amount is right around 30%, and then use that rate increase to sell a bond to pay for the first 6 items that we had on that capital improvement program. If you go back to that, David. So those are the items that, when I talked about a train right in front of us, that are really they need to be taken care of today. They really do. And if we don't spend the money today, for instance, we have a project going out next year, the Curry Street project, where we are improving that street, similar to what we did on Carson Street, a much smaller scale, but that type of thing. We're going to go and we're going to build that project, we're going to fix it, but we're not going to fix storm drain as part of that project, which means we're putting down new concrete, new asphalt. Meanwhile, we didn't fix the storm drain that's under there. That's the condition we're faced with today. That's the way that project's going to roll forward. So the proposal, the compromise that we've been kicking around is an opportunity where we raise the rates, a one-time rate increase to chunk off those first 6 capital improvement items. We bond for it. That would raise the amount of money we need to pay for those, and that's going to be an approximate 30% increase, with the understanding that in 18 months, Public Works will be going through a rate analysis for water and wastewater, based on the fact that we did it 7 years ago. We've had 5 years of rate increases. We want to go back, look at what we've done, look at what we've spent, look at the revenue, and do another check as to where we're at, and kind of we need to plan out the next 10 years. I don't know what that's going to tell us, but we want it to be public. We want everybody involved in it. So what we're suggesting is that when we do that in 18 months, it would be appropriate to also include a storm drain rate analysis at that juncture, and we can, at that time, we can look at the options that David talked about. Is it lower level? What's the flavor of the citizens as well as the Board of Supervisors in terms of what we look at with that storm water study? Things that have come up in the last month, although we haven't got a lot of public comment, is some of the testimony that we just heard. Is there's some tweaks that we could make the system better with some minor tweaks. We could also throw out everything that we have and rebuild the system soup to nuts from bottom to top, and come up with a program that, every square foot, how much are they contributing to our stormwater system? I mean, that's an option too. Staff doesn't necessarily feel that that's where we should go, but because there's such a variety, it needs to be understood it's not as simple as water rates. It just doesn't work that simple, because there's so many variables and components that go into stormwater. So there's a lot of things that have to be considered, and we just want to be careful that what we're doing today doesn't bind us in the future. At the same time, we've got these projects coming at us that we need to put some money at. Furthermore, after the floods this spring or winter and spring, there's some things some low-hanging fruit, literally low-hanging fruit, that with a very little money can go a long way to fix those troublesome areas for when the next storms come.
Thank you, Darren, for that. And Mayor, you read my mind, and that was the discussion that Darren and I had yesterday with regards to plans and moving forward. And I'm sensitive to what Andrew has just said, and that is definitely a tweak that I think needs to happen sooner than later with regards to this. But I think that, in my opinion, if there was a one-year increase, the 25% proposed, and you were able to bond against that, that would get us at least comfortable to moving forward. And then, as Supervisor Bagwell mentioned in our last discussion with regards to this, we need to look and see how well these rate increases are working for us. And I do want to incorporate stormwater into that. I do want to broaden the categories that we have in terms of billing. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I do want to explore induction wells so that we can sell something instead of raising the rates all the time. And so there's that thought process as well. But I think we need to look at this as the bigger picture with regards to this and see what best we can do moving forward. But I don't want to box us in at this point in time without any rate increase. We know the rates have to go up. They haven't. And I understand that, but it's the judicious way of looking at it and how well that increase is working and how we can make it work for us. That's my thought.
Any other thoughts? Oh, I got some lights going on here. Supervisor Bagwell, go.
So I could potentially support that option for a 1 year and look at some bonding. And I don't necessarily want to support a $250,000 full-blown rate structure review, but maybe over the next 18 months, you could look to consider taking your current categories and then breaking them down by the size of the lot. So maybe it's commercial tier 1, 2, 3. Maybe it's residential tier 1, 2, 3. So not a lot more complexity and all data that exists. But I do think it is unfair to take a guy with 5 parking spaces versus 200 parking spaces. So maybe simply the size of the parcel itself, and you can just put a couple little tiers to adjust for fairness in that, and then I would be a little more comfortable. So I really don't want to go down the road of a $250,000 study, because when I look at that list, that would take care of number 1, Lakeview. So it doesn't make any sense to increase fees and not do a project. So I'm very interested in keeping all of the dollars working to projects. So maybe just a slight tweak in the categorical rate structure would give relief to some of the smaller commercial versus, so I think we could all work together to come up with some slight variations that could make everyone more comfortable.
And I would just like to add to Lori's comment, as you and I have discussed, the low-impact development can be part of that tweak. In other words, credits for what someone can do to mitigate what might be their impact to the stormwater system. So just, just to include a thought process with regards to that, because we've talked about it, but we have no way to reinforce that methodology.
And I think the direction, David and Rob, especially over the last 6 months, as they've dug down into what we did in the past and how we got here, a lot of knowledge has been gained, and there's some momentum there. And so being able to in-house over the next 18 months, work with that and come up with some ideas, some solutions, such that when we bring a rate consultant on, we would be bringing them on for 3 components, which is going to reduce the overall price if they're looking at 3 components rather than just stormwater. So that's going to reduce the price in itself. And then having some direction from us ahead of time when they provide us a scope that this is kind of the direction we want you to look at and to look into. I mean, that's going to save considerable amount of money, no doubt.
Thank you. I got a couple of questions regarding this proposal. You and I had a discussion with David and the city manager a while back, and I made 2 points that were important to me, and one of them is it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me not to go the bonding route when bond interest levels are as low as they are now, and when I'm pretty convinced, and nobody has a crystal ball, but I'm pretty convinced they're going to be higher in a couple of years. What bothers me, though, is now what you're talking about on the other side of it is, as I said, I wanted it to run out over 5 years, as did sewage and water, because sometimes government goes too slowly, and that's probably how we got here. And now government's going to move too fast to make up for the difference if we do it all in one fell swoop. What you're proposing, I heard 2 different figures come out. You said 30%, Darren, and I think Karen said 25%. What figure can get you the bonding you need if we do that and then wait what would really amount to not just 18 months, but by the time it got done, a couple of years or so?
So David's going to pull up the slide to show the exact number, but what we are proposing here today to move this forward is a one-time rate increase and bond that amount. So I had suggested a 30% rate increase, which is going to generate roughly $5 million in bonding proceeds. And then that $5 million, if you go off of that capital list that we showed, that would pay for the top 6 projects. So that, in our mind, that buys us a good solid 3 years of capital projects that we can do, that we can fix the immediate need that we have in stormwater. The UFOC recommendation, which we support, but it showed a 95% increase over 3 years. So I'm not suggesting that a 30% increase, we're going to be done. I'm suggesting that it buys us some time to figure out the direction we want to go, and then ultimately in 18 months use a rate consultant to study that, to look at it, to work with the UFOC and ultimately this board as to how we make those tweaks and make it beneficial to all.
Yeah, I understood what you were saying, but you do understand my concern that 30% is a good jump, and then you come back 2 years later and you fold it in, as if I understand what you're saying, into water itself. And how are we going to bring the public along on this? Because, well, they'll get 30%, and then 2 years later, another, part of it that'll be folded in. We have some work to do on that regard, don't we?
Oh, we absolutely do. We absolutely. That's what I don't want to, this is not a solve-all at all today. It's fixing our current immediate need in capital. But the program, as David's presentation showed, we have to look at the program holistically and all those little components. We're not doing that here today. And I don't want to go on the record and make promises that we're done. And
no, I understand.
I think we're going to be more in the neighborhood of an 80 or 90% rate increase when this is all said and done. But the feedback we're getting is, let's do it right. And we're not prepared here today to go back and relook at all those rates in a short period of time and get it right and get the money we need today.
What would 25% get you, the first 5 projects?
So if you look at, he can plug that number in here.
So if you look up there, and sorry, I don't have my mouse. Oh, sorry. I don't have my mouse with me, but basically, and these are approximate numbers, these aren't absolute, but a 25% rate increase. Here's the current rates right here, this column right here. A 25% rate increase you can see it would increase single family from 4.38 per month to 5.48, so $1.10, and that would generate about $350,000 in additional revenue annually. So an approximate $5 million bond, and Sherry, you probably know better than I do, approximate $5 million bond is going to run in the neighborhood of $350,000, correct? Something like that, roughly.
What do you think? What do you think?
Nothing like putting you on the spot there.
Yeah, we actually talked to bond counsel about this, and with 25%, I think it was about 4.5 million is what he conservatively estimated. But again, interest rates are pretty low, and he usually estimates pretty high, so we could be in the neighborhood of 5 million when it's all said and done.
That was my recommendation for the 30%, just so there's a little buffer there, a little bit of coverage there, but I'll take what I can get, obviously.
Well, I'm not certain where you know, if you're debating whether it's 25 or 30%, I mean, that's a big jump no matter what you do. And so, you know, I don't know that, anyway, you might, you know, look at, if we're going to go down this road, you know, we ought to look at what we think is comfortable. You know, we don't want to willy-nilly raise rates, obviously, but we need to make sure if we're going to do these bonding things, that we're doing it with our eyes open, that we know what we're going to get out of it. So anyway, Supervisor Bronkowski, sorry.
Interesting conversation. I would be opposed to a percentage increase in the rates. I think it can be done by a flat increase. If the revenue need is $350,000 annually to service the bonds, every dollar increase across the board per property raises $200,000. So if you raise the rates across the board by $2 per parcel, then you're raising $400,000 a year, which gets you the revenue that you need. Otherwise, we're exacerbating the problem that we just heard about. We're taking somebody who has a small residence that's zoned RO, who's paying $20-some when he should be paying $5, and now we're going to give him a 25 or 30% increase. Until we can actually get through a rate study and understand kind of the implications that we need to deal with, if we can raise the revenue through a flat rate, which I would support, say $2 per parcel across the board for every parcel, we're still raising the same amount of money, and that should get us through to the rate study. We've obviously spent hours talking about this. So you know how I feel about all this. You know, maybe the other board members don't, but, you know, I would support a base rate plus some sort of surcharge based on impervious area so that we can kind of equalize the properties rather than do it by zoning. I mean, I'm open to any suggestion that works, but there's, as you said, there are multiple levels of very complex methods and also things that are going to happen no matter what decision we make that we have to look at. So, you know, I understand your need to raise capital immediately for capital projects, but at the same time, I don't want to rush this process and end up again with making a broken system even worse. You know, and I kind of feel like option 1 and 2 may get us to that point. So, you know, I'm open to anything that you guys want to talk about, but I really would like to go with a flat rate.
Well, you do a flat rate, and the largest customer base in the city is going to take a hit harder.
No, he takes nothing. He takes $1 or $2. He's talking about a flat dollar change.
Over what the UFOC said.
No, they get less. They're going to go way down.
But they would go up from $4.38 to $6.38 if you do a $2 increase.
Right. Single family. Go back to the, can you flip back to the UFOC rate proposal where it showed the 3-year, yeah.
I also wanted to ask, how many years was that bond? Was it 20 or 30? 20?
20-year bond is
Okay.
what we looked at, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So what Brad's, well, I want the other, yeah, thank you. So what Brad's suggesting is we wouldn't do $39 or $36. We wouldn't implement FY18 that way. You'd say it's $638, $24.56, $26.64, right? So $2 onto the 29 and then $2 onto the 31.
All I'm saying is all that, but that throws the biggest increase on the largest customer base that pays stormwater right now, single-family homes. I mean, that's all there is to it. I mean, if that's where you want to go, that's why,
Well, you don't have
I'm not
to
so
do
certain
flat
that's a
two
fair
each.
thing
You
to
could
do
do
either.
one,
I mean, why should they, I mean, granted, they're the largest base, but why should you put the highest rate on them?
So we don't have to do an equal flat. You could do $1, 2, 2, 2, or, you know, I mean, we can arrange it to,
That doesn't raise enough money.
well, I'm just saying, maybe it's $3 in your commercial, which is still less than the 39.
Well, the other thing is,
But,
if we're going
like
to
you
do, if
said-
we're going to do, just good discussion, but I mean, if we're going to do a rate study, I mean, I think, they're having a discussion there, but I think that, you know, unless, if you do it on a flat rate across, you're actually making a decision on rate design at that juncture. If you do a percentage increase, you know, you're kind of keeping the rate design that you've had in place over time. So I'm not so certain that it does us well to make a rate design change in the middle of all this when we're going to do it in 18 months. But I throw that out for your considerations.
In theory, I understand that, but the truth is that only about 60% of the properties in Carson City are residential, and we've got 90% of the properties classified under single family. So the underlying foundation is not accurate to begin with.
Well, yeah, but I got you there, but I see that, but I don't know that I've had that vetted out to at least to what I would agree is a good vetting process. I mean, I'm gun shy about, you know, making a change in rate design now. If we're going to bond and we're going to do the rate design change, I think we ought to stick, my own sense is, I think we ought to stick with a percentage increase and let it go. Because if you make a change, one, you're making a change in rate design, and two, you are affecting, you know, we're making a judgment call that right there, that residential customers, or single family anyway, are subsidizing, are being subsidized right now. And I don't get that, but.
Can I also see the list of, I'm concerned on one of the issues that you brought up. Can I see the list, because you were talking about we're going to be doing the Curry Street improvement and we're not going to do stormwater in that project because there isn't any money yet. If I'm not mistaken, the list that I saw there didn't include Curry Street up in the bonding. So that doesn't make sense to me either.
Yeah, that's a little bit of an oversight in that list, that the Curry Street project was included in the Carson Street money. That's,
The label,
yes,
it just needs a label correction.
It's not indivially labeled there.
Okay.
It's included in the Carson
I just
Street.
wanted to make sure again that we didn't need to make a tweak on
no.
that component
It's there.
also.
It's there.
Okay, and I think I'm going to have to go with what Bob's saying. I actually understand Brad's concerns and issues, but I do think we have to maintain the rate structure as it is, and we're going to have to go with a percentage, because I think that everybody should be equally impacted by our decision. And so just throw that out. I think you'll see changes when it's time for the rate study, and I don't think it would be burdensome for anyone. And I'm very concerned. One of the issues I had, Dave researched for me, and thank you very much, was the number of individuals that aren't able to pay their utility bills. And so it surprised me to see how high the number was of people with deficiencies. And so I'm going to say that we need to go with the percentage, because I don't want the lower end to get even more hit. And so I think I'm going to have to go with the percentage idea for now.
I don't know who's next. It was like John, and then.
I think I'll go whether it's my turn or not, because it's everybody else has spoken. You're both right, in one sense, obviously, because getting to equity is impossible from here, right now, if we're going to go along with the suggestion from our experts. So consequently, it's very tough to say, okay, we're going to add a percentage, or it's very tough to say we're going to add a surcharge, whatever you want to call it. I don't know how you get there from here, but that's what we're trying to do, is do a stopgap to get to the 18 months so we can do a rate study, if that's what we decide to do. So if you make a motion, I'm going to have a problem either way. You're not going to solve the problem. But I tend to agree with Brad in one sense, and that is, since it's already inequitable, it doesn't make any sense to make it more inequitable for one class. The smallest number happen to be commercial, and less inequitable for the larger class. So go ahead and make a motion, and I'll decide at that point. But I don't think we're going to get here from there from here.
Well, don't be so pessimistic. I mean, an eternal optimist is the mayor here. But I think, you know, if we do these things, I think, you know, if we do go down this road, I think that the motion should be that we have them bring back that with the ideas of, okay, how long is it going to be? What's the bond amount? What are they going to cover exactly? And then so we can see that without having to do it here on the record here. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with doing it on the record, but we need to see it in print, and people need to know what we're doing, so.
Consensus direction?
Right. That's just
Supervisor Abel.
And I just, you know, I agree with both points of view, but I agree more strongly with Lori. I think that the percentage increase is less burdensome. And so I think, to my mind, that's where we need to go.
All right. Anybody in the public want to weigh in where we are? I don't see anybody. Okay. Well, why don't we try this? Karen, somebody want to try a motion, and then we'll go from there. But I think the motion should be have them bring them back, and then we can tweak what's going on. So let's try a motion on that.
So I move to direct staff to bring back a proposal that would include a bonding mechanism based on a percentage that would allow you to complete, how many projects? The first 8? Six? The first 6 projects, and to bring us back what that would be needed to do so.
Well, and I would add to that motion that in 18 months, that there is a rate consultant brought in such that...
They'll bring that one in when they do it with the water, sewer, and stormwater, right?
Okay.
For the whole rate study piece on that. Okay.
Okay, there's a second on the motion. Discussion. Anybody? All right, I don't see any on the motion. No discussion on the motion. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. See that, John?
I saw that.
Optimism, man.
It was a very carefully worded motion.
Optimism, optimism. That's what you gotta
I
do.
was
All right, let's see if we can,
right.
we're moving right along here. I mean,
Leave it to the First Amendment.
we're on yeah, leave it to First Amendment, that's right. All right, we're doing, let's see what we can get accomplished. I know we got folks waiting, and we've done it. Ms. Sullivan, how are you doing today?
Fine, thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Dorpansky, how are you? Good smiles, you know, that kind of makes the day, you know, when people are smiling. All right, where am I? 21 Alpha. All right, let's, on second reading, this is bill number 115. Any changes since first reading?
No, sir.
All right, board public comment? Board, are we ready?
Yep.
On the motion, the motion's in order on second reading.
I move to approve bill number 115 on second reading, ordinance number 2017. 15.
No, 2017-15.
Right, but there's also a bill number.
Bill number 150.
I got the ordinance number right. Okay. Ordinance number 2017-15, an ordinance amending Title 18, Chapter 18.16, Development Standards, Division 1, Land Use and Site Design, Section 1.17, Multifamily Apartment Development Standards, and Section 1.18, Residential Development Standards in Non-Residential Districts, to clarify that the single-family residential development and two-family dwellings may comply with open space requirements either through common or private open space, based on the findings contained in the staff report.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. All right, let's take up 21 Bravo. This is a discussion on regarding a tentative subdivision map from G&E Investments for Gordon Street.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Susan Pansky for the record. I'm going to condense my presentation since I know you guys are trying to get out of here. So this is a proposal for a common...
Condense it, but give us the facts, so don't worry about it.
No, I definitely
you
will.
don't, so.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is a proposal for a common open space subdivision in the Brown Street specific plan area on approximately 1.37 acres. The subject property is 4 parcels total, highlighted on your screen. It's between North Edmonds and Fairview Drive, and on zoning, in the zoning district, multifamily apartment. There are 4 residences on the property currently. They will all be demolished to make way for this new subdivision that's being proposed. This is the proposed site plan, 16 single-family attached units on lots approximately 3,700 square feet average, with all private open space or private area Per the common open space requirements, they are allowed to have either private open space or common open space. In this case, they're proposing all private in the side, rear, and front yards. And then they will have shared driveways off of Edmonds Drive that will be covered by access easements and a maintenance agreement amongst the property owners. This, because it's in the Brown Street specific plan area in the master plan, as well as in the multifamily apartment zoning district, it has 2 layers beyond a single-family subdivision of development standards that this applicant is required to meet through the specific plan and the multifamily standards, as well as the conditions of approval being proposed by staff. They do meet those requirements, and I'm not going to go through them, but if you have any specific questions about them, they're all in the staff report. They're proposing, this is basically the elevations that they're proposing. Again, 4 units attached on each building, if you will, although they are single family, and each lot will be individual. They all are 3 bedrooms. They range in size from, I think, around 1,500 square feet to 1,800 square feet. This is the front, side, and rear elevation, and you'll note the middle piece is the side that would face both Fairview Drive and also Edmonds Drive. Staff is recommending a condition because they face those streets to beef up that architecture on those 2. Because they're in the multifamily zoning district, they're required to meet the landscape standards in Division 3 of our development standards. This is a conceptual landscape plan that they've provided. And then I'm going to end on the site plan and note that Planning Commission recommended approval by a vote of 5-0 with 1 absent and 1 vacancy. And the applicant and the applicant's representative are here to answer questions, as am I.
Regardless of how we come out on this one, the investment in the Gordon Street and the Brown Street area out there is extremely important for redeveloping that area there. So, all right. Supervisor Abel.
Are these for purchase? And what, if they are, what is the purchase price on these?
I believe they are for purchase, and I'll defer to the applicant on purchase price.
Chris Baker with Manhart Consulting here on behalf of the applicant. We're actually working through that right now. We're doing an engineer's cost estimate. This architecture and floor plans were actually developed specifically for the site, so they haven't been built before. So that's in process. I would like to point out we have made a commitment to put shutters on the ones that face the street. I know that is something you have asked for before in the past, Karen, so we're going to commit to that.
Just wondering that, you know, for the lower entry-level price point, if this is going to kind of meet that category, because we are lacking in that type of home.
That's the goal, and that was the basis for the project, but we're just trying to pencil out and see where we end up.
Three bedrooms and 1,500 up square feet. I can't imagine them being under 250 or $300,000, or am I crazy? Don't answer the last part.
That's the only part I was going to answer.
Just have a general question, because one of the conditions is buildings will be painted with earth tone or subtle colors with the exception of trim. And so and planning gets to approve that. So my question was, the picture that was shown with the colors, would that be an example of what you would approve? I'm trying to understand, what does subtle, trim, and I don't know.
Yeah, so it's relatively subjective at the planning level. And
Thank you. That's why I hate that one, to tell you the truth.
That is right out of our development standards.
Right.
But basically what we're looking for, the general intent is to not have excessively bright body colors, but brighter colors on the trim is certainly acceptable. So for example, the red, while it definitely stands out a little bit more in this case, because it's a little bit more subtle, could definitely still fall into that category.
Because I was going to say, I really do like the colors, because my question is, so someone comes in, does a development standard, you meet that, but once the project's done, they could go in and paint it any color they wanted.
That's correct.
Okay, good. I just, thank you.
Chris, is there going to be an association?
There's actually going to just be maintenance agreements. The goal here was only 16 units. It was too much of a heavy lift to have an actual HOA, so everything's private open space, so they'll have dedicated 20-foot rear yards. There will be access and maintenance agreements for the shared driveway and for the exteriors of the structure, so for painting, roof improvements, everything else. So we're working with an attorney now to develop that agreement.
Okay, and so where I'm going with that is, who's going to enforce parking? The driveways are probably a little too short to park in the driveway for at least my vehicles. So if you have somebody that is blocking the shared driveway, who's enforcing the parking to remove that vehicle so people can get to their units?
The minimum driveway is actually 20 feet, so it's bigger than a standard driveway would be anywhere else in Carson. They range from 20 to 23 and a half feet, and then they do have a 24-foot driveway. So, we prepared deep lots so we could have adequate driveway access to eliminate that. There really isn't, to be honest with you, there isn't somebody who's going to be enforcing some sort of a CC&R for blocking the driveway. I mean, again, we're only talking about 8 units on a shared driveway. Hopefully, if someone's blocking the driveway, you'd just go tell your neighbor to move their car. But I understand that sometimes that doesn't work that simply.
Okay. Other comments from the board? Public comment? Anybody? I don't see any. Want to take a motion on the tentative map? Somebody want to do it? Supervisor Bunkowski, excuse me.
Move to approve TSM-17-052, a tentative subdivision map request from G&E Investments LLC for 16 single-family attached residential units in a common open space development on property zone multifamily apartment within the Brown Street specific plan area located at 1709, 1725, 1759, and 1809 North Edmonds Drive, assessor parcel number 008-306-09, -11, -15, and -16, based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval in the staff report.
Motion, second on the motion, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chris. Mr. Manhart, I was going to call you. Sorry. All right. All right. All right. Let's take up we'll let the let's see if we do. It doesn't look like it's too controversial on the historic the historic district issue. So let's take that up, and on we can let the fund go maybe till this afternoon or something.
Make a motion on the fund.
Okay, we could do that. Okay, let's take up 21. Charlie, Hope. Ms. Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a request for a tax deferment for property at 402 South Division Street. Per Municipal Code 2102-040, the Board of Supervisors is authorized to designate an open space assessment to any site or structure designated as historic. The subject property is a contributing property in the city's historic district. This is before you today because technically it's a change of ownership, but realistically they transferred the ownership to a trust. The property is already subject to the deferment. On June 8th, the HRC reviewed the request and recommended approval based on conformance with the Secretary of the Interior standards, the local historic guidelines, and their local policies. So staff is recommending approval. The applicant was not available to attend today, but I advised her that should the board have concerns, I would request that it be continued.
So
Thank you.
No, there's no change to the land. We're just making a move from individual to trust.
Correct.
No big deal. Okay. All right. Public comment? Motion's in order.
I'll do it.
Supervisor Bagwell.
Oh, go ahead.
I move to approve a request from RBT 0641 Irrevocable Trust for a historical tax deferment on property located within the historic district, specifically at 402 South Division Street, APN 003-128-02.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay, we'll try the clerk recorder one. They're not here, but we've all gotten, it's in the packet. It's public information. Anybody have any questions that we want to have the clerk here or the recorder here, or do we just want to take it on the record?
On the record.
On the record's fine. Motion's in order.
I move to accept the annual technology fund report from the Carson City Clerk Recorder pursuant to NRS 247.306, showing an estimate of proceeds that will be collected in fiscal years 2017-18 and a proposal for the expenditures of the proceeds. Any unused funds will be maintained for future training or technology for the County Recorder's Office.
Motion second on the motion, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay, I think we're just going to leave the other stuff till the end of the day, so we'll be in recess until 1:30.
All right.
Why do you love to read a book? No.